Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this tutorial. In this one, I'm going to teach you how to create your very own PHP MVC framework. Okay, so an example of an MVC framework from PHP is CodeIgniter, of course, and Laravel. So if you've ever used Laravel or CodeIgniter, then you understand what a framework is. Now we're going to build one from scratch. Building one from scratch will help you understand how these frameworks actually behave and work. That way you can manipulate them to your own advantage if need be. We're also going to use Object Oriented PHP, so it would help if you had some knowledge in OOP, but not really required because I'll explain everything anyway. You can check the link in the description if you want to learn that course. All right, so Laravel or CodeIgniter, we want to make that kind of a framework. And the framework is going to use a system called MVC. So it's a PHP MVC framework. So I'm going to explain what MVC means and how it works. So why use a framework in the beginning? In fact, the first question is, what is a framework? For those that do not know. So a framework is like a skeleton of a website. So imagine a already started website, but because the one who started it doesn't know what you want to use it for, so they just put in all the general things in there. Like maybe they know you will need some pagination, they know you're going to need a routing system, they put all that in there. They know you're going to need some models to connect to your database, etc., etc. So a framework is just a bunch of code that is already created that you normally use when trying to create a website. That way you don't have to write everything from scratch. Okay, so that's what a framework is, basically a skeleton of a website. So this is different from WordPress, which is just a CMS or a content management system. With WordPress, you need no experience in coding. You can simply get it running immediately. But a framework needs you to have coding experience because you actually need to code your website. It just starts the process for you, but you have to finish the coding process. Whereas WordPress, you just put in a bunch of plugins and then it starts running. Even without plugins, it will run immediately. But a framework is a little bit different because it requires you to actually code your website. So what's the advantage? The advantage is that you do faster web development, of course, because some of the code is already there. And then you get a routing system that's good. The advantage of a routing system is that things are well organized. When you want to add new pages, it's easy to add new pages to your website because you have a system in place that tells you how to access those pages. There's also code separation because it's MVC and object oriented as well. So the view, which is the code that you see as a user, is separate from the actual code that does the logic. So that's why it's called MVC. MVC stands for Model View Controller, but I'm going to explain that next. Then there's encapsulation. So all the code is encapsulated like inside a capsule, which means it's self-contained. And so if you want to move the code from one project to another, you can easily do that. Also makes upgrading your code much, much easier. So let me go ahead and explain what MVC is. MVC is Model View Controller. That's what it stands for. Okay, so Model View Controller. Now, let's start with the view. The view is what you see. So MVC is just a system of a framework, a type of framework that separates the models, the views, and the controllers. So normally you'd have a PHP page where the top, let me use some illustration here. So normally you'd have a PHP page like this if you're not using MVC. And then there would be some PHP at the top here. And then here there's the actual view down here, which is the HTML. So the user doesn't see this PHP here because it runs in the background, and then what they see is just the result of the PHP down here in form of HTML. Now the problem with this is that when you want to replace how the page looks like, you're going to encounter some PHP code in here, because there's all kinds of mixtures in here. There might be PHP code at the top, but even in the view there's direct mixing, a lot of mixing of logic code and then HTML as well. So replacing or changing how this page works is a tedious process, because you have to separate the PHP, the HTML, etc., the logic. You can't just throw that away. But when you're using MVC, you have separate files. One file contains the PHP only, no HTML in here. And then the other file contains the result of this part here. So the result of the PHP is sent to this file, which we call the view file. So this just shows you the result of that PHP. Now this one that does all the controlling is called the controller. So that's how it is. So this is where controller and view come in, like that. So the controller is the actual logic of that page, and then the view is the result of that logic. Now, once in a while, during control time, when the controller is doing its thing, it will need to read and write from the database. So instead of just connecting directly to the database, it will go through what is known as a model. So this is where the model view controller or MVC comes from. So this one is a model like this. Okay, great. So the model will connect to the DB, the database, and then it will relay information back and forth here between the controller. So let's say the controller wants to find out how many views this page has. So it will ask the model, hey model, check in the database, what's going on, how many views are there, and then the communication happens, and then back to here. Now the reason we just don't connect directly to the DB instead of using a model is because we want one entry point to the database, so that in case, for example, we change the type of DB we use, we don't have to open every single page in our system to change how it's connecting to the DB. We're just going to change the main model itself, and the whole website adapts to that. So efficiency is key here. We want to do as little coding as possible, right? So this is how these guys connect together. Now, what these controllers, each page contains a separate controller, just like each page contains a separate view. So each view is for each page, because what's on each page is different. So we need new views for each page. Just like controllers, every page has a separate controller as well that acts on that particular page. And then in the same way, because we are connecting to a DB using a model, each table in the database has a separate model. So hopefully that is understood here. And then there's a router. So the user down here, let me just delete this. So the user will type in a URL here, okay, URL, and then the URL will call up the router and ask, hey router, which page does this user want to load? And then the router will be like, oh, this one wants to load the home page, and then it will go ahead and load the home page controller, because I said every page has a separate controller. So once it loads the controller will run all the logic in there and then load a specific view for the home page. And then if the controller in the process needs to read from the database, maybe to load posts, then it can go ahead and check what table do we want to load from. If it's the user table, it will load the user model, ask it to get some data. If it's the posts table, it will load the posts model, ask it to get something from the DB and bring it back here, and then finally show us the result in the view. So I hope you understand how the process works. Now we're going to see it in practice. So to get started, we're going to need to download a few things. So in our case, we're going to need a text editor. In my case, I am using Sublime Text as my text editor, but you can use any text editor of your choice. And then we're going to need a server and a database. Now, luckily, those two things, the server and the database, come in a package in a software called XAMPP. So download this software, open the control panel, and start Apache and MySQL. Apache is our server because we need to copy how websites work online. So we're creating a local server here using Apache on our local machine, and then we use a database as well. So make sure you click start on both of these. Now, if you're using a Mac, use MAMP instead of XAMPP. Download MAMP and install it. Okay, so once you have a server running like this, then we can begin to do some cool stuff, some coding. So what I'll do is I'll go to the folder that I've installed XAMPP. In my case, this is inside C XAMPP, and then there's a folder called htdocs, which is what holds all my websites. Every website should be saved in there, and then I'll make a specific folder for this particular website called MVC. So as you can see, I have many websites in here. So I just want to drag and drop my folder, the MVC folder here, so that I can add files and edit from here rather than going to the file browser. So there we go. Oopsie daisy. Okay, so once you've installed that and it's running, just open your browser and type the word localhost like this. Now, if everything was installed properly, then you're going to see some kind of dashboard here. If you see page not found, then something isn't running well. Make sure that you switched on Apache and MySQL in your control panel. Okay, now when you type localhost, what you're actually accessing is this page here, the htdocs folder. Okay, so when you type localhost, you're accessing this folder. Now, so if I go ahead and do /MVC, then I'm going to access this particular folder here that I'm working with. So I'm going to do /MVC. Now, if you're using systems that are case sensitive, make sure you type the spelling in the correct case, if it's capitalized like that. So this is the parent directory, nothing in here, which is cool. Now we're going to put a few files in there. So I want to put my some files in here, but instead of putting files directly here, because what's happening here is, imagine I put some files in here. So just say new file and say maybe, instead of new file, say new folder. Let's create a folder called app, and let's create another folder called public. Now, if I come back to my browser here, you will see that if I refresh, it shows me the index of what's in here. So the reason I've created two folders in there, the public and the app, is because I want to have public files that are not so critical to be in the public folder, but those important ones to be the app folder. Now, the reason we're putting them outside the public folder is because they are more secure when we do that. Okay. If the public folder is a landing folder of your website, then it's going to be very hard for somebody to access a folder that's above that, which is the app folder, or adjacent or next to it, its sibling folder. So that's why we put our most valuable files in there to avoid that security issue. Okay, so now that we have that, we can click on public to go in here, but there's no file in there. So let's add our index file, the first file in the public folder, and just say index.php. That's what I'll call it. That's the text I'll type in there, and that will be its file name. And so now, if I come back to my browser and refresh, automatically the index.php or home.php page is loaded. So that's why Apache has loaded it like that. So whatever I type here, hello world, that's what we're going to see in the browser, like that. Okay, so there's the file that's working. Now, remember we have this illustration of how things work. First of all, the user types in a URL. Then we have a router, the router that is going to decide what page should be loaded depending on what's in the URL. Then when it finds that page, it's going to load the controller of that page, which contains all the PHP and no HTML. And then, depending on how the PHP works, it's going to load the view, which is what the user will see. But then sometimes the controller may need to read from the database, so it's going to ask a model that is responsible for that particular table to bring information and put it there so that it can generate the view file. So this is a basic idea. So the first thing we need to do, obviously, is create a router, because that's the first entry point here. So that's what we're going to do. From the router, we'll go to controllers and then views, and then lastly, models. So let's go to the router now and create one. Okay, so we are here. Now remember that we want only one page to be accessed no matter what we are browsing for. So we need to change the we need to add an htaccess file that's going to tell Apache that whatever the user types in here, just redirect all that traffic to the index file. Doesn't matter what they type, but if they are targeting a very specific file, you can load it. Otherwise, load the index.php. Because if I type some gibberish at the end here and press enter, it will tell me this file is not found because there's no such file name in the public folder. But let's change that so that regardless what we type, it will send us to the index page so that we can add a router in there. Okay, so there's some code here I'm going to copy and paste to create our htaccess file. So here is the code that I want you to type. So type everything as it is. Please make sure the capitalization is correct. Do not take any shortcuts. So pause the video if you have to and type everything as required. Anything that has a hash symbol at the beginning means it's a comment, so not really important. You can leave this out if you want, same as this line. But these lines are important. So this one, for example, make sure that if whatever the user types in the URL is a valid file name, then it should just load that file. Same thing with a folder. So if it's a directory, just load it as it is. Otherwise, if it's not a valid file or not a valid folder, just redirect everything to the index.php file. Okay? And then create a variable in the get superglobal called URL, and then put the values of the query string in there. So we're going to see how this works in a moment. So don't forget to leave a space here and type this. There's no space here, by the way, so don't leave a space here or there. So type this as it is. So I'm just going to copy this information, close that file. I also have a robots.txt. We're going to look at that. So I'm going to right click on public folder, new file, and paste this information. Then I'm going to save this file in here, and I'm going to call it dot. So the name starts with a dot htaccess. Okay, just like that. The htaccess is the file extension, so it's not really, doesn't have a file name, it's just .htaccess. So once we do just that one thing, so you see in the public folder now we have index.php and we have htaccess. Once we do this, this thing that was saying not found, if I refresh now, it will still load hello world, which is the index page, regardless what I type in here. I can put any gibberish there and it will still load this file. But you can see that if I add a new file in here, let's say new file, just for the kicks of it, I'm going to call this one go.php. So there's go.php there, and inside we're going to say this is go file. Okay, so if I come back to my browser, refresh, so you see I type this gibberish, it always loads the index page. But if I type go.php, it will load the Go file because this is an actual file that exists. So that's what our htaccess file is doing. And if we try to, let's say, mute these guys right here, let me come back to this and refresh. You see that we remove the ability to even load valid files. Now we are loading hello world no matter what we do. But this is not good because we have CSS files on the website and JavaScript files, and we need those to load as they are. This is why this section is important. Without that, you won't be able to load your CSS or JavaScript files. Okay, so moving on, let's delete our go.php. Now we put a robots.txt file. Now what this does is that it tells Google, or it asks Google, because it's a request, it's not a command, because the agent can choose to ignore this if it wants. So this is just which files or which links to ignore. So I'm going to copy this. Usually, if you're going to be dealing with some Ajax things, so I like to disallow this or the admin part. So let me close that. What we'll do is we right click in the public new file, paste this information. You can omit this one, but I think admin is important. This tells the Google crawler to not index this admin page, because no one really wants to be searching for your admin page. They'll be searching for maybe the about, the contact us page, but rarely the admin page, because this is just for you to administrate your website. So you can tell Google not to index this page. I think even this is good enough like that, but who knows, to be safe. So this says user agent or, which means it asks even the Bing crawler, the Google crawler, etc., to do the same. So I'm going to save this file inside public folder and call it robots.txt. All right, so there goes our security thingies, and this is good. Now that we are able to load the home page regardless what we do, then we can do some interesting things like create a router. So here I want us to create a routing system. Now keep in mind that, let's go back here. Let me go back here. I want to be able to capture this information that the user has typed and show it here. That way I can know what the user is trying to do by looking at their URL. So remember that in our htaccess file, we told it to save all that information in a value called URL in the get. So you can change this. You don't have to be, it doesn't have to be URL. It can be anything as long as it's a valid key. So you can say data or URL, doesn't matter. Okay, so in here, what I want to do is put my PHP tags like so. If in a PHP page, you never want to put HTML, don't ever put the closing PHP tag, just leave it out. It's always better that way to avoid problems. So we open our PHP tags. Now what I want to do is simply echo or print whatever is inside the get variable, like so. So if I now come back and refresh, you see that it shows me this data right there, which is what you see here. But it's in an array called, in the key. This is the key, the URL key, because that's what we wrote in our htaccess file. Keep that in mind. If I put a 2 there, you will notice that this is what we will get over here. Okay. Just a side note there. Don't put that 2 there. Okay, now I want a little function to show me things very neatly instead of this. So I'll do this. I'll write a function stuff, and then I want you to echo some pre-tags. I don't want to keep doing this all the time, so that's why I'm creating a function to do it for me, like this. Open and closing pre-tag, and then just tell it to print R. What's there, and instead of get, we're going to use stuff there, like so. Okay, so it's just a function to print what I want. So instead of doing print R, I'll just say show what's in the get, like so, and it's going to look much nicer. So if I do this, this is how it looks like. I like it better this way. So you can see that it's an array, and then it's got a key named URL, and that's what has this. Okay, so with this in mind, let's imagine we have a link like home slash product slash I don't know. So you see, this is what we get. A URL that looks kind of valid. Home page, we want a product, and that product is called crisps. So this makes sense. So what we want to do is separate these keys these items using this slash so that we can individually have home, product, and crisps. And then we'll always know that the first one is the page we want to access. So home always represents the page. The others, we can use them as we wish. So what I want us to do is put all of this stuff in a value code URL, and then do an explosion and say explode. I want to use that slash to explode the values, and those values are supposed to be in the get variable URL like that, with a key URL like so. Now, once we have URL here, I want us to echo it out here and see what it contains instead. So URL like so. So if I now refresh, this is what I get. So in the URL, we've created home, product, crisps from this line here. Now, the tragedy is if I remove everything from there, I just want to access the home page without typing home, I'll get a problem. It says undefined key URL, because there will be times when there's nothing there and this will not exist. So it's going to create a problem. So to nip that one in the butt, what we're going to do is we're going to do this and say, let's just use URL and say is equal to get URL. But then sometimes it won't exist, so we'll put the double question mark to say if it doesn't exist, just imagine somebody typed home instead. So that, let's put that here instead. Boom. Okay, that solves our problem, because now if I refresh, it just writes home even though I didn't put anything there. So at least now we know the user is accessing the home page. When we do that, this is what we see. So that's the page name. The others are debatable. So let's create a system now that will allow us to, since we have these guys here, we want to use the very first part to look for a controller. Okay, like I had said here, the router needs to find a controller. So all we need to do is get the name of this page, just to name the controller as the same page name. That way it's easy to find it because they are named the same. Whatever the user types there, that's what we try to find. So in order to do this, let's organize our code a little bit better. So I'm going to create a function here instead that says get or split URL. That's what I'll call it, split URL like this. Okay, and then put this code in there like so. So this splits our URL. Instead of echoing it out, we tell it to return this data, return URL. So it will return an array that has split that. And we can show that by simply doing URL, or instead of just saying show the result of splitting the URL. So we just run this function and put it in there like that. Okay, and we will see that we'll get exactly this, no difference at all. Okay, so now that we've done that, we need another function now that will load a page. So here we're going to call this function, we'll say function load controller. That's up to you what you want to call it, load controller, like that. Okay, so the load controller page will call the split URL page so that it can split the URLs. So here I'm just going to say URL is equal to split URL like this. Okay, so this function is calling this one to do the splitting, and once the splitting is done, the files will be in here. And all we need to do now is create a file. Try to find the controller file. So here we just say file name is equal to. Now I don't want to put the controllers inside the public folder. I want them in the app folder. So right click and create new folder, and I'll call it controllers like that. That way I can add my controllers in there. And let me add a home controller here, new file right there, right? I'll just call this home controller. I'll just type that in there. And then I'll call it home.php in the controllers folder. Now use a capital H there because we want these to be classes, and it's a good idea to use capitalized names for classes, just for consistency. Not a must, but it's cleaner. So Over here we have file name is equal to, right? Let's create a file. Now imagine everything is based on the public folder. So that's the base folder. So to get to the controllers, we have to move a folder up and then controller. So here we're just going to do /up. So // is a folder above, and then we go to the app folder and then /controllers/. Then now we want to get whatever item is in the first of this URL. So we just concatenate that and say 0, whatever the first item is in that array, and concatenate .php over there, because it's going to be a file. Imagine we have home at the beginning. This is going to be home dot, and then we add a .php at the end. Now, like I said, our classes are capitalized here. So let's use the UC first function that comes with PHP to make sure that we capitalize whatever text is in here. So this is our file name. All we need to do now is to see if it exists. So say if file exists, like that, and we put file name in there. So if that file name exists, then we can require that file, right? Let's do require file name. And that's it. So we load that file if it exists, and it does exist. There's a home.php there, and so things are going to work just fine. So let's come back here and refresh. So we don't see anything. Home, we should have seen if it was loaded, we should have seen it here. Now, if it does not exist, we should put an else here. And then we can, here you can do whatever you want. You can load a file that will tell you controller not found or something, controller not found, or just echo it out. But I think we're going to put a file here. For now, we can't because for some reason that file isn't found. So let's see why it isn't. So if I refresh, I don't see any of this stuff. Where is my home.php? What's going on, really? Doesn't look like any of this is running. Oh, that's because we haven't actually run this function. So let's run it here. Sorry about that. We need to run the load controller function for things to work. So refresh, and there we go. So we have home controller. Now, for some reason, if I type in home4, which I know is a controller that does not exist, then it says controller not found. Now, instead of that, we can actually create another controller here. Let's make a new file. This one will be 404 page not found controller. Let me save that. So here I'm just going to call this one 404. Now, because 404 is we can save a file like this, but I don't think we can name a class as 404. So let's start with an underscore because we can use that. So say underscore 404, just because class names are picky. Let's save that. So what I'll do here is in the index, when we don't find this, we're going to create another path here that we will load and then require that file right here. Okay, now instead of all this, we're just going to look for the underscore 404.php file instead and load that. So back here we'll do this, and we are loading the page not found controller instead. But if I type one that exists, it has loaded the home controller. So from now on, all we need to do is add a controller in here for us to be able to load that page. So for example, I can right click and say new file. This one could be the products controller. Save that and just name it products.php like that. And that's it. So if I come back now and change home to products, it means I want to access the products page, and there it is. So this is how a routing system works. So up to this point, we've created a router. So that's how it works. Very simple and straightforward. And then from the home page, we can load views from here and models, etc., etc. All right, so moving on, let's make things more organized because like I said, this is going to be object oriented and this doesn't look very OOP. So let's change that. So in order to change things here, I want us to reorganize things here. So the first thing we're going to do is, in every system of ours, as long as we're going to be using login and sign up and all that, we will need to use sessions. So let's just make sure there is a session start at the beginning here, even though we don't need it right now, but you will need it in your project. Now this is the advantage of loading a single page, because whatever we're browsing, only the index page will be loaded. So which means always session start will be on regardless what page you are on, which is nice. The second thing is we change this to object oriented. So let's create an app instead. Oh, a class, sorry. So we're going to create a class named app, like so. Okay. So a class, for those of you that do not know, is just a thing that can, for our purposes here, it's a thing that can hold functions, many functions inside. That's all. So all the functions that do one particular thing, we can just put them in one class. That way we don't have separate functions like this. And we can always just carry the class to any other project and it will work because it's always self-contained. Whatever functions it's referencing are within itself. So what I'll do here is, except for the show stuff, I am going to just grab this whole class, this here, and put it there. Now, when we're using OOP, it's up to you to choose how OOP you want it to be, as much as you would like. So there are times when it doesn't make sense to use a class, but certain times it makes sense to use a function, just normal functions instead of classes. You can do that. Or if you don't want to use functions directly at all, you can create a static class and put all your functions that are static in there so that you don't have to run functions directly. But in our case, we make it simple. We're going to have both object-oriented sections and just simply procedural parts, but we stick to OOP as much as possible. So we've put all this in a class. Now, once we've done this, we have to declare what kind of functions these are. Now, these are going to be private functions, like this. Now, the reason they are private is because we are not going to we will instantiate this class, but we're not going to what's the word I'm looking for? Instead of inherit, no class is going to inherit these functions. So they can be private, which means they can only be accessed from within this class. Now, the reason I'm making them private is because this class is the only thing that will run on this website. No other, everything rather happens within this class. So even though I put them as private, it's okay because they are going to be accessed from within here, which is not a big deal. And then I want another file that will contain functions, like this function right here. So what I'll do is I will cut this function out, the show function, and go to controllers. Now in here, not controllers, but the app folder, I want to create a new folder called core. This is what will hold all the core, the things that need to be always loaded when the website is running. You see, these controllers are loaded sometimes and sometimes not. If we are on the home page, this home page controller will be loaded, but this one won't on this one. So this is loaded sometimes, right? But what we put in the core is something that will always be loaded, like for example, DB control and functions. Certain functions that are always required will be loaded in here. So in the core, I'm going to put a new file. So we need a few files here. The first one is the config.php. So we can put our configuration there. Never put your configuration in other file types except PHP. It's safer that way instead of txt, for example. And then right-click New File. I will paste my function there. Don't forget the PHP tags, of course, at the top. Do not put the closing PHP tags. So this one is functions.php with an S. Okay, so there we go. And then we are just going to, now the thing is, because we are accessing the index page, I'll have to load these files manually because they always need to be loaded. But in here I can put 100 files. Now I don't want to litter the index page with 100 files. So what I'll do is I'll just put a init file here. I'll save init.php. This is the file that will load all the other files within its folder. So what you need to know is that everything in the core folder, every file here should be loaded here. So let's just do that and say require. That's how we load. Require config.php. We start with config because it contains the config. It will contain the configuration. So obviously we need to load that first. And then we may need to run some functions. So let's load that. Let's save the init. Oh, init is already saved. Let me duplicate that. We will also need to put a database.php file. Now this one is a class, so I'll use capitalization like that. And then we're also going to need model.php. And then we're going to need one called controller.php. Okay, goody. These are capitalized because they'll be classes. Now I've put them in this order because model will extend database, and then controller will also extend database. Maybe not, but doesn't matter. We can put them in this order. So let me save that. Now, since these files are referenced here, we should create them here, of course. So I'll say new file, save this one to be database.php. This one will contain the database class. New file, let's save. This one will contain the controller.php file, and that's the class. And then new file again, save. This one will contain the model.php file. So you may be wondering, why are we creating controller.php when we have controllers in here? Well, the thing is, these are separate files, and they're going to be classes with separate functions. But there are functions that will be common to every controller, that every controller should have. For example, every controller should be able to load a view. So there'll be a function that loads that view. Now, instead of putting the function in every one of these classes, we'll just put it in one class, this one, the main one. And then the rest of these will extend that functionality so that we have less code. Hopefully that makes sense. So now that we've loaded everything from the init, what we need to do is grab the index file and tell it to load the init.php file. That way everything is loaded here before we try to run anything. So what I'll do here, after session start, I'll just say require a specific file .app/core/init.php. That way we have loaded all the files in here right there before we do anything down here. And then since this is a class, we might as well just cut everything from here. I'll save this, go to core and create a paste here, right? So PHP, paste there. I will save this as app.php. Okay, now that I've added the app to core, I need to include it in the init, otherwise it won't be part of the project. So every file you add to the core folder, you must include it in the init for it to work. I'll include the app file last because I want it to run only after everything else is loaded, because this is what actually runs the website. So this is the app class. When we load it, it's trying to run this function. Now this function will not be found because now it belongs to the class, and we can test that to see it. We say fatal error, call to undefined function, load controller. Alrighty then. So here we can't load controller anymore. We have to call it through the app class because it's part of this. So I'm just going to delete that, sadly. Oops. Alrighty then. So that's the app class. Everything happens within here because this is where we load things from. Yes. Now let me go back a bit. Let me close all these files. Alrighty then, back to here. So here at this point, I'm assuming the app file has been loaded, which means the app class is there. So I'm just going to say app is equal to new app, like so. Okay. So once I do this, this is how we instantiate a class in order to use it. So we're instantiating the app class. Since it exists, no errors here. But the problem is, once we instantiate it, we have to actually call this function here. So in order to run, I don't want to have, we can do that by doing this. We can say app load controller, like that. And this will work just fine. So we start the app, we load the controller, which is right here. So we can either do it this way, or we can add a function that runs immediately. We instantiate the class, and then that function can call this function here. That can work as well. But because this is a private function, it will not work for us to do this because we're trying to call it from outside the class. So unless we say this is public, then it's going to work just fine. But we can make it public, no problem. It's not a big deal. Then if I refresh, call to undefined function split URL. Okay, so this one is saying this function is not known because it's trying to find a function outside any class, but this one is within this class. So we have to use this class to call this. So we'll use this keyword like this and say this split. This represents this class, and then we're trying to run this function here. The same way outside here, we're trying to run this function that's within the class. Now instead of app here, because we're within the class, we just use the word this. Okay, so hopefully that is clear. If none of these OOP concepts make sense, just watch my OOP course, link in the description. All right, so at this point, we are still loading things as they need to be loaded. You see home controller. If I type product here, to still load the product controller. Okay, so that wasn't found because there should be an S on products. What have I typed? Wrong place. There we go. So it's working just fine. Home controller loaded just okay. So let's recap a little bit here on what's going on, right? Just in case you've gotten a little bit lost, here's what's happening. First of all, we've told the website to, using the htaccess file, to only load the PHP file. Whatever URL we type, you just load this guy. Once we load this index page, we start our session. Then we require our initialization file, which actually loads everything in the core folder. Now, since app is part of the app class, is part of what's loaded, we can instantiate the app and run a very specific function in the class itself, which is the load controller function. And once we load that, this is the one that will call this function to split the URL. And once the URL is split, it will look for the first item in the URL and load a controller class from there, controller file. So now these files like homepage, they're not classes, they're just files, normal files. So it's up to you. If you don't want to use OOP, you can simply make these your pages and put all your HTML here and everything. But that's not so much fun now, is it? Because we'll have it will be hard to upgrade your system. Better we have controllers and views as separate files. Okay, so speaking of that, let's add a view folder here. So app, new folder, and let's do views. So now we have app, views, and while we're at it, we can also add a new folder called models, because we know we're going to need models anyway. This is MVC anyway. So views, models. Now we want a way to load the views. Now, like I had said, in the core, we can create a controller class that is going to have basic functionality of loading views. So let me put some PHP tags here and create a class we're going to call controller with a capital C. So this is class controller. And in here, we're going to have a public function because it will be used outside this class, this is going to be called view. We just call it that because we want to load a view. Here there will be the name of that view, which is part of the file name, and then we'll load it here. Now the way we load files here will be similar to this, so I'm just going to copy this particular one and put it here. Okay, so where are we loading from? We're loading views from view folder. So we just change the controllers to views. We don't need this UC first because there's no need to capitalize the view files. And then what I would do is with the view files, just so we know they're view files, we're going to be putting a .view before the PHP. So I just say view dot like that. Okay. Now we don't need an underscore here because the view file is not a class. So let's just remove that underscore. We'll have a 404 view file. So what we're saying here is that look for the name. So grab this. This URL is not a thing. Let's replace that with name. Whatever the name of the file is, just add .view.php and find it in the views folder, right? If you can't find it, then look for the 404 view and load that instead. Okay, simple and straightforward. Now it means we have to find those files here. We have to make sure those files exist. So I'm going to right click on views, new file. Let's just start with the, let me put h1. Let's see here, page not found, h1, like so. So in the views folder, we're just going to type 404.view.php and save. Okay, so we have one view file here, which is 404, page not found. Now, how do we make the home page or the home controller load the view it wants to load? Here, instead of page not found, we can say view file not found. Okay. So in order to take advantage of this function that's in here, we're going to go to each one of these controllers and convert them to a class as well. So I'm going to say PHP and then say class home. Now, if you notice, what we need to be doing is the name of the class should be exactly the name of the file as well. That will make it easier to load the class because the file name is the same. So this will be gotten from the URL. We try to load the file using the URL, and once we find it, we'll know that there's a class within this file named after the same file name. So that makes things a little bit easier. So we wanted to be able to use the controller class. And so what we'll tell it is to extend it. We'll say extends controller. Like that. Okay, so what we are saying is that this class, whatever is inside the controller class, every function which is here is as good as we've imported it in here. So even though this class has nothing, I can actually instantiate this class and try to run the view function from within here because of this extension. We have imported whatever is in the controller class. Now remember that the controller class will be able to extend it because we're including it in the init.php. So it's always loaded and ready to go. So once we say extend, it will find the controller class and extend it. Okay, very good. So once we have that, we are good, which means at any point we can create a function here. And this one will always have a function called index, like that. This one will be a public function so that we can be able to call it from outside the class. Okay, so this is the function because every class must have a function. We can just put code outside a function in a class. Every code in here must be within a function unless it's a declaration of some kind. But that's why we put at least one function in this case, we're just going to call it the index function because that's the first function that will always be there. Then we can create multiple functions depending on what we are doing, but the index one will always be here. Now in here, that's where we can do some echoing and say, this is the home controller, like so. Okay, so if we get this message, it means things have worked. But if we try to run things right now, we'll get an empty page because we're no longer just having code here. We have to instantiate this class and actually run it. So all we are doing in the app right now is simply loading this file, this one right here. But simply loading it doesn't do anything. What you can do if you want is just down here, you can say home is equal to new home, like this. Okay, and then you can say home and do this and say index, like that. And this will work just fine. So if we do this now, you see, this is the home controller. So you can do it this way, where every controller file will have this code at the end, so it can be able to run this. Now the problem with this is that here we are fixed to running the index function. I want the function we run here to be dictated by what's inside our URL, not just running it like this. I want it to be determined by that. So if we had coded like this, we'll always be running this. Now the reason I want this is because, let's say for example in the home page, and we want to load a product. So instead of going to the index function, we go to the product function. So there could be multiple functions here. A good example is the CRUD. Let's say or user management. For users, we have add user, edit user, delete user, right? So in that case, we can make separate functions for each one of those. Excuse me, I'm almost choking there. So the index function could be what displays the list of users, and then we can have several functions like the edit, delete, and update, which is edit, add new, delete. So we can have more than one function here doing separate things like this, and then the URL, what's in the URL, if there's edit in the URL, we know that we need to load the edit function. If there's delete, we need to load the delete function, etc., etc. So this is why this won't work very well. So let's undo this and do it in a better way. So instead, there's what we can do instead of this, there is a function called call user func array, like this. So what this one does is, let's do this. Let me empty that. So this param array is just what things you want to pass to the function. This is how you can call a function. So I want to call this function here. Now, whatever I put here is the same as passing that data here. Like for example, A, B, C. So if, for example, in the function I want to pass this data, I can actually put those in an array here. So for example, I can say A is equal to something like that. So if I put that and then I put a comma, so this is just an array I'm putting here. So you can pass an array here if you want, but I'm just creating this array on the fly. So I can do this, B is equal to B something. So I want this to be text, of course. So all I'm doing is passing an array here. That's all, just to show you that I can receive that information here. Now, if I pass 2 items and there are 3 items here, we may have an error. So instead, what we do here is we put is equal to, give them default values. That way, in case we don't pass them in here, it will still be safe. But this is not necessary, just to show you that you can do that. But then what's important is the function we want to run. Here I want to run this function here, the index. Now the problem is the index function is within this class. So if I want to run a function that's within the class, I have to supply both items. So first of all, I have to supply the class, and then comma, I have to supply the name of the function. So in this case, it's the index, which is right there. So this is exactly like what I did to call this particular function, but I'm doing it like this now because I can later edit what function I want to run here. So that's the point. So if I refresh, you see everything is still running as intended. However, if I type index3, which I know is a function that does not exist here, we will have a problem. You see there? It's not a valid callback. So these functions are called callbacks because they are given here. So in this case, we can use what's in the URL to determine what we want to do. So since everything is loaded here, let's go to the index page. In the app, you see the app is the one that contains this URL that tells us what's in the URL. So this would be the best place to actually run this core user func right there. It would be the best place to run it because we would then use the variable in the URL to put here. Here we cannot access it because it's within another class, which is this one. And this home controller is another class. So we're going to just have to instantiate it here within the app.php. So once we get here, once we load the app.php there, right? This part is just for requiring the file. So what I'm going to do down here is I'll do this. That way, once we load, we can instantiate and then call. So let's see if that works as well. Let me refresh, and you see, works just fine. Only problem is if I load in a different file that does not exist, then we have a problem. See that? Home class not found, because that's the class I'm trying to instantiate here. So instead of doing this, I know the file I've loaded, and I know what's inside the first URL is the name of the file I have loaded. So what I'll do here is this. Let me go at the top here and just say public, or I can say private, no problem. Private value controller. So I want to put a default controller here, which I'm going to call the home controller. And then here I want to put a method, because functions inside a class are called methods. I'll call the default one index, like this. That way, in case we don't find any, we're just going to use these babies here. So once a file exists, then before I even require, or even after requiring, I can just update what's in the controller there. So just say this controller, like this, okay? Whatever is in that controller there, I think I don't need this guy there. So this controller should be equal to this. Okay? The reason we're equaling it to that because we have found a file that resembles that. So let's just use that as the controller. Good. So that's a controller name. Great. Now, in case this doesn't work and we get here, then the controller name will be different. So the controller here will follow the underscore 404. Like that. That's the controller we want to get. Okay, so we load the file. The controller name is equal to the file name. That's why we are doing this. So once we do that, now we can instantiate the controller. Because you see here, I'm doing home is equal to new home, right? Now, because this is very specific to the home page, so I'll just call it controller instead. I'll say controller is equal to new, whatever is in this at that moment. Let's instantiate that. So if, for example, we're on the home page, this will be equal to home. So we're going to say new home. If it's on the 404, we'll say new 404. And which means this now becomes instantiated, a valid callback, which we can put here instead of home. And then there's a method called index right here. So I'm going to grab this. And instead of just putting index there, I'll just say this, whatever is in the method right there. Now, currently the method is index, so we can't change that. We'll have to change it by checking what's in the URL. But for now, let's just see if this is working. So I'm going to refresh. It's not working. So it says a class underscore 404 not found. Why is that? Why is it even looking for this one? So let's just show what's in here. I want to see what's inside there. So this is what's there. Okay. So it says page not found, but it's saying the class cannot be found, which is true, because if we go to the 404 page, there's actually no class in here. So let's copy what's in the home controller and put it here. Let me grab this message and replace that message here. Like that. We don't need these ABCD. I'm just using them for that side. And then here we need to name the class the same as the file name, like so. So that's why we needed the underscore, because if I put numbers like this, wait, can a class name start with numbers? Let me check if that's actually, yeah, unexpected integer 404. So it doesn't work. So that's why I'm using the underscore there. So I was right the first time. So it says undefined variable method. Okay, so that's my bad. If I go back to the app controller, it should remove this $sign here. There we go. So now it says unknown named parameter A in the index.php. Where is this? App load controller. So inside the controller, that's where the problem is. So it's saying unknown parameter A. Where are we using A? We are not using them here. Let's go to the where is this? In the it does load this. So what is happening? What page am I on? Page 4. So this goes to the 404. Okay, so it says up 33. That's where the problem is. So up line number 33. Where is A being used here at all? This is weird. Let me remove these guys. Let's reduce problems as much as possible. Oh, so that was the issue. Anyway, it doesn't matter. We'll fix, oh yeah, we'll fix that by putting an actual array there, no problem. Alrighty then. So this is what we're doing here. So now all you have to do is make sure the app exists here. So everything in here should be a class. So I'll copy this, put this in products. Controller. Let me remove these babies. I don't need them. I'm just using them for the home. There we go. Alrighty then. Okay, so cool. Now things are running. If I put products here, you see, this is a products controller. If I put home, that's a home controller. If I put something that does not exist, 404 controller. So things are working as they should. Okay, now let's see how to load an actual view. Okay, so if we go to the home, let's try right here. Now it extends controller. So whatever is inside controller, which is this function, we can use within here. So right here, instead of echoing this controller, I'm just going to say down here and say this view. So we're saying this because the function view is contained within this class, and it's only contained within this class because we're extending it from the controller, the main controller. So this will work, but here we need to give it the name of the view. We are looking for the home view, but the home view does not exist. We only have a 404, which is fine. It will load that. So this is the home controller, but view file not found. Now let's put our home view here, new file. I will load that one and then paste it here and say home page view. Save this, and I'll save it as home. Don't forget the .view.php, and there we go. So if I now refresh, so that's how we successfully load a view page like this. Okay, so from here now we can Let's see now. Okay, so what this means is that if you want to make a new page, simply make a controller for the page, name it whatever you want in the URL to be typed, for example, home or products, and then put a view with the same name, and then just put .view.php. So this is the base framework that we have here. So for example, on the products page, this has a product class. So in the same way we are loading the view here, we can do this and load the products view here if you want, like so, and then products like that. Okay, now since the products view page does not exist, we will see a 404. So let's undo and just load the home page. So even on the products page, we can still load the home view if we want to. So if I go to products, you see it's still loading the home view page because that's what we've told it to load from here. Now, another interesting thing is that you can actually put your views inside folders. So you can say, for example, products slash products. So what this will do is, to the path of the view, it's going to add a products folder and then slash a file named products.view.php. So here, if I right click, I can create a new folder in here and just say products. And then in there, I can do a new file and then save that. So I can copy that, put that inside here and say products view file like this and save. So here I can say products.view.php in that folder, and it's going to find it, as you can see here, products view file. So which means you can actually put things inside the views folder in folders to organize that better. Now you can do the same thing with controllers, okay? So for example, right now we have the products page here, but if I move it to, let's say, inside controllers, we create a new folder called products. And then if I do move the products, let me just open this folder, and I move the products file into the products folder like this, it won't find it. Now, it doesn't really make much sense to put controllers in folders. That depends what you're trying to achieve. Maybe it would make sense, maybe not, because each controller is like an individual file, but views can be multiple for the same page. You can have many views for the same exact page. Maybe you separate them into smaller chunks so you can reuse those parts. So it makes sense for views to be in different folders, but controllers not so much. But in case you want that, if now I try to do this, it will tell me controller not found because it didn't find it in there. It's moved to the products folder. So what you can do is make it in such a way that what is this? Let's go to the app. Right here where it says if file exists, you can do another trial. If the file does not exist, instead of loading the 404, you can do another file exists thingy. You can copy this. Let me copy that. In fact, this whole thing up to here, copy this and put it there like so. So this is just one option. We are not going to use this, but I'm just showing you that you can do it this way. Then you change, instead of having just controllers like this, you repeat this part right here. So I'm going to duplicate that and put a slash. So that first of all, you have the folder with the same file name and then the file name.php. If that exists, then we load that instead and not the 404. So in this case, if I refresh, I do get the products page, as you can see here. Okay, even if I want products, if I remove, I still move it from here. Let's go back to the folder. Where is that folder? Here. So it's in the products folder. I can move it out out back here and delete this folder, and it will still work because it checks both sides. As you can see, I refresh the page, even though I've moved the file, it still works. So you can do it this way, but I'm not going to do that. I was just going to show you that you can actually organize those into folders. So from there, we are good to go. Now we have a functioning kind of a framework. Like with this, you can actually make your website. Just put your file here and do that. But there's only one problem here. Loading views is weird because of the htaccess that we made here. So let's add more content here by putting a folder. Sorry, I said open folder, but I wanted to create a new folder called CSS. And actually, let me make a folder called assets. And then inside here, I will put another folder called images and another folder called JS. Okay, and let me open that folder. Let me move CSS folder into assets folder. So I have an assets folder in the public, and then I'm putting CSS, images, and JavaScript. Now, you have to put your JavaScript and CSS within the public folder. If you try to put these guys in the app folder because you don't want people to copy them or for security reasons, unfortunately, that means even the client's computer will not be able to access those files because they are restricted. Only the server will be able to access those files. But the nature of CSS files means they are needed on the client's computer and not on the server, because CSS files only work in the browser, not on the server, but in the browser. So which means they must be publicly accessible. And this is why we added this htaccess exception here to allow for CSS and JavaScript files to be loaded still. So you cannot protect from someone from copying your JavaScript or your CSS or your images from your website. So you must put them in the public folder, otherwise they won't work. So in this case, if we tried, because you see the view files are in here in the restricted area. So if we try to load CSS files, we may get a bit of a problem because the CSS files are looking at the actual URL here. You see there's products/crisps. The image file, for example, will think this is an actual folder. So let me do a test here in public. I want to go to my desktop. Let me grab an image from here and take it to another folder. So in the public folder, assets, images, and paste it here. So I'm just going to rename it as image, just so we can see what's going on. So what I want to do is go to let me close all these files here so that we see what's going on real quick here. So I'm going to go to the home.view page. This is the home page, right? Now here I want to put an image file, and the source is going to be, because always remember things are relative to the public folder. So let's say assets/images/image.jpg. That's the image really, and I'll save that. So let's come back and look at our home page here. So if I type home, this is the problem that you're going to see. You see it says broken link, even though the image is actually there. You see that the image is there. If I remove everything but home page there, if I do this, oh wait, actually, let me remove all of it. Oh, still not loading, hey? So there's something wrong here. Nothing to do with, let's see, did we write the path properly? Assets, images, okay, so it's the comma here instead of the dot, which is giving me a problem. So if I refresh, you see the images right here, right? But if I go back, I'm still on this home page. you see the image is still here, even with the text home there. But if I type slash and put something else there, as in here, you see home/products, still on the home page, but the image has disappeared. If I do this, you see that. Let me just type slash anything here, and the image is gone. That's because now the image is relative to this /d and thinks this is an actual folder. So to solve this problem, we have to put absolute paths to the image. So here, instead, I must use the HTTP. So I'll say HTTP // and then say localhost / I'm in the MVC folder / public folder / assets. This is the full path to this image. And now notice that I'm using HTTP, and I'm not using the direct file name like C drive C / I'm using the server. It must be that way. So if I now refresh, you see that the image is here, even though I put / many things at the end there, as you can see. So we can't afford to type this on every single image. So instead, what we will do is just put it inside a a constant, because the constant can be accessed from anywhere. So we want to echo it. So I'm going to do PHP like this and say echo, and we'll call the constant root like this, and then close that PHP tag. So we put this root and then assets like that. So let me save this. Now we haven't created root, but if we go to the config file, we can do that there. Let me put some PHP tags, because this is where all the configuration will happen. To create a constant, you use the keyword define, and then you define its name, and then you put its value over here. Okay. Now, when you're using an online version, when you upload your website online, you have to put the correct root here. And maybe it could be HTTPS, so you put it there. And then here you put www.yourwebsite.com. Don't put a / at the end, just like this. So when you move your website to an online system, that's where you put your URL, the URL to your website here. In this case, our URL is this one. So that's where we are doing that. So keep that in mind. What you can do though, is this is what I do personally, is I do this. I'll say if server, like that, and then put server name here, _name. If server name is equal to, and say localhost. So if I know I'm on localhost, this will tell me I'm on the localhost server. So if I do this, then I can put an else statement. That way I don't have to change back and forth the config file when I want to edit my website for any reason. So if it's localhost, I'll put that there, like so. And then this will be, because you can only define something once, so that's why we have to put an else statement here. We cannot just you can't override a constant once you've set it. So like this, you can put your database connection for your localhost here, you define your root, and then you do the same for the database connection of your online version and the root for your online version as well. This saves you a lot of time of editing. Whenever you download your website to edit some things and then upload it back to the online version, you won't have to change anything in your config file. So with this, now we are able to use root here, and let's see if that actually works. If I refresh, nothing has changed, it works. Now keep in mind that PHP echo can be replaced by an equal sign, just like that, and it will still work exactly the same. You can even remove the spaces here, so it's nice and simple like that, and it will still work. Okay, so we fixed that problem by putting root. So every time you want to load an image, even a CSS file or a JavaScript file, make sure you put root at the beginning and then /assets / maybe JS and then the file name. So keep that in mind. So now that we are done with these, we can move on to something else, which is the models. So we have views, we have controllers, we need models now. So like I said, just a recap, if I want to put a JavaScript file here or a CSS file, I need to follow this process as well. So here I can put maybe a link like so. And then here where it says href, I have to put root assets, and then I'll put CSS here because that's where they are. And then maybe it can be style.css like that. So this is how you load your CSS files and even your JavaScript files. Do not forget this root here, very important. So just a reminder there. And also now we can go to models. So we need the main model here, which will extend database. Okay, so in database here, what I want to do is I want to create a class in here called class database. So I want to start with that because models has essentially just classes that connect to the database. So let's begin by connecting to our database. So before I even make a class, I just want to run a connection right here. So let's do con like this. Connection is equal to. Now for a professional MVC thing, we have to use PDO because PDO is just better. So let me add a string connector here. Now with PDO, you have to tell it what driver you are using. I'm using MySQL, put a full colon, and then put your host name there. In this case, this is localhost. And then you put a semicolon there, and then you tell it the, what do we tell it here? What else is there? DB name, yeah? So what is the DB name? So here we don't know the database name, but you can always omit this part for database name. You can simply add it on later to use it there. But if you already know what the database name will be, let's put it there. So here we're just going to say my DB. That's what we'll call it, my DB. And then let's put that string in here. But then we have to put username, which is root, and the password is an empty string. Now, if you're using mump, the password will be root as well, just like the username. So I just want to know if we made a connection here by doing show con. Just show us the connection. Is it a valid PDO thing? But also, we don't really have this database yet. So if you want, you can actually omit this database part. I'm not sure if this will work with mump, but we can test it. So if I now refresh, call to undefined function PDO. Now it's looking for a function, but instead it should be looking for a class, and that's because we forgot the word new like that to tell it this is a class. So as you can see now, it shows me PDO object, which means it actually worked out. Now, if I undo and put my DB name there, don't forget the new here again. Now that DB does not exist. I'll still get an error that unknown database. So which still means things worked out. So what I could do is put the database name there. Where is this? Anyway, this part doesn't matter because we've seen that it actually makes the connection. So that's fine. This is all we needed to see. So instead of putting these variables directly, we're going to go to the config file. Right here on the localhost, we're going to do some more defining. So I'm going to say define, instead of root, this will be DB name. So here we're going to put the database we'll be working with. We'll call it my DB. And then you can put some commenting like this and say database config like that. Okay. And then let's duplicate this. So there's DB name, there's DB host. This is localhost in our case. And then there's DB user, and this db password here. So in our case, the password is empty, the user is root. So if you changed these values in your MySQL, you asked to enter a password and username, use those instead. So yep, I guess that's what if you want, you can change the driver as well. That's up to you. Let's put driver. Maybe you want to use Postgres database instead. You can do that. So I can copy these babies and put them here. That way, when you go on your online website, you can put your stuff here instead. Okay. So we have that. We have this. That's good. Now let's just make sure that my DB actually exists. Oh, before we do that, let's get back to this part. So since those are constants, they can be put anywhere. So like in here, I'll replace with a constant, which is DB host. Oh, my bad. Sorry. Let me just copy that and undo. This is not the part that should change. It's this part here. So that's a DB host. Let's change that part as well to represent. We don't need that last one there. DB name and DB user. I don't need these dots here anymore. And then same here, DB pass. Okay, cool. So with this, we'll get the same message again. So now we can go to our localhost and say localhost PHP my admin, which is where our database resides. Now you must make sure that MySQL is running, otherwise this won't work. So since we are here on our databases, we can click to create a new database and say my DB and just hit create, and we've created our database, and then that error will go. Okay, cool. So now the PDO object is valid. Now we don't use it's only showing because of this. If I remove that, then it won't show anything there. Now what we would do here is, because we are using classes, we can do a class database like so. Class database, capitalized like this. Okay, and because we need functions inside classes, so we'll say functions, what do we say? Functions connect. Function connect. This function will always only be used in this particular class, so call it private. And then this is what will create the connection, like so, right? And then instead of just doing this, we'll say return connection. Now, maybe just for readability's sake, let's do that instead, so it's easy to know what's happening. So we create a new PDO object, we put it here and return it as a result of this function. Alrighty then, alrighty. And then from here now, we can create some public functions and call this function, let's say query, just to run a query from here if we want to. Public function query. This function will take a query and it will take some data in form of an array. So let's put an empty array because not always we'll have this. I'm doing this because we want to use prepared statements. Prepared statements are safer because they prevent SQL injection. Normally when you write a query, you put your variables inside the query, but because usually the variables you put in the query come from a user form, the user can manipulate your query using those variables. So instead of typing their username or password, they will type a string that will manipulate your database also known as SQL injection. So to avoid that, we use prepared statements where we supply the query separately to the variables. That way, the computer knows this is just the query and these are just variables. They are not part of the query. So I have security. I have videos that teach security. You can check those out on the channel. So here we have this. And all I need to do now to create a connection is to say con is equal to this connect. Okay, so now it's calling this function to run a connection, and then we can run something. Now, once we do this, we need to prepare a statement. So call this one statement is equal to connection prepare. And then we prepare the query itself like so. Now, once we prepare the query, then we can do statement. Let's see if we'll check. We just call it check because we are checking to see if it will execute. Now, during the execution, this is where you supply the data, if any is available. So let's put that there. And then we'll just check if the result is an array, and at the same time this count of check. Actually, instead of check, maybe we can just call this result. It's easier to remember, I guess. Okay, so this just shows us there's a result there. Let's return the result. Actually, this is not result. I think check was better because I want result after this. So yeah, actually not true. This one, let's put it at check. I've missed a step. Sorry about that. So I'll say if check. Then let's get some actual results now. Say statement fetch all. Now this is where you can tell it what you want to, what kind of items you want to fetch. You can use the constants provided by PDO by doing that, and then you can put fetch. And then here you can put objects, which I like, or an array like this. So depending on the result you want an array, that's what you do. If you want objects, you do this. I like objects myself, so I'll leave it there. And then let me duplicate that, remove this one so that this is inside. That way now we check if the result is an array and return the result. Otherwise, if it gets to this point, we just return false because things didn't work well. Now, it's not always that when we return false, the query didn't run, because sometimes there are queries where we get no results. Like, for example, an update query or a delete query, we don't get any results back, so it just returns false. But this is our query function. This is how we run queries. So we can test this by running one query here. Now, I don't want this to be a class. I want this to be a trait, because somebody told me I should show how we use traits as well. So we'll call this a trait instead. Okay. Now, if you want to make it a class, the way it is right here, what I would use this for is if I go to model, for example, and create a class named model. Actually, if I use this, main model class, so you give me something nice here. So I'll call this one model, and this one extends database, just like we did with the others. And this is a constructor here, or let's just say function test. That's what we'll call it, function test. And in here, what I'm going to do, because it extends database, it means everything in database here I can use. So I can run this query function. So if I want right there, I can run a query by just typing a query and say query is equal to, and then I'll just say select all from users. Now there is no users table, so maybe we should create that very quickly. Let me come here, create table. So click on the database you want, and then let's create a users table. Number of columns, we leave it there. Let's put an ID. Let's do this. ID, name, age, and maybe date. So this one is, what's this? Date time, default value, current timestamp. Age, we'll leave it at integer. Name, variable character, maybe 100 characters. This will be integer. Put auto increment, make sure it's primary key, and say go. So now we have a table. This is just for demonstration purposes. This is not permanent. And let me go to insert so I can add a few records. So I just need to add a few people. And then let's put John, and let's put an age, and hit go. So now it shows you the query that it ran in order to create that, which is nice about this. So if I go to browse, you see there are 2 records here, which is nice. So now if I try to, in the model, I say query, and then I can eventually do this and say result is equal to query. Oh, sorry. This query, like that. So I can do this because database is an extension of model. So then I can put query there, like so. And then I can simply show the result. So in order for this to happen, we have to instantiate model and run the function test. So we can do this anywhere. Since we are in the home controller, we can do that in the home controller here, just to show that things can work like that. So if I refresh, that's the home controller. Before we echo all that, what I can do is I can just say model is equal to new model, and then I'll say model test, like that. Okay, so that's how I'm running that function there. And if I refresh, you see it shows me 2 results. There's a record here and another record there. So things are working as intended here. But there's another way of doing things. Instead of extending database, we can change database to a trait instead. So let me change that to a trait. So I'll show you the differences. Once I do this, I cannot extend a trait anymore. So if I tried this, it wouldn't work. So class model extends trait database. Class model cannot extend a trait. That's what it's saying. So let's remove the extension. So how exactly do we incorporate that? We say use database, like this. So once we say use database, that's how you add traits to these things. Instead of extending, you say use here. And it's going to work now. And there we go. Everything works as intended. So you may be asking, why use this instead of the extend? Well, extend can only extend one thing at a time. So if I say extends database like that, I can't do another extension like this. This is not going to work. You can only extend one other class at a time. But there will be times when you've created multiple classes that you want to include within another class. So that's when you set them as traits instead of classes. That way you can say use database, and then you can say model, John. So if all these were traits, you would use them like this, which means every functionality from each one of these is now part of this class as well. This is how you reuse code in a smarter way without having to retype it in every class. So this is quite handy, actually. There we go. Use database. you. The only problem with the trait is that you can't instantiate it directly. You can't instantiate it like this. So you can't use these guys without using model. So you need model to use database, because a trait cannot run on its own unless it's used within another class. But that's fine. So inside model, we need to create all the functions that are common to every table. Whenever we want to access every table, there are common functions that will be in here, so that when we add individual models here for each table, then we can reuse the common functionality in here. So let's see what common functions we would need. The first thing is, these will probably be public functions because they will be used outside mostly. So public function number one, we already can query, right? But we need to be able to insert. Okay. Let's duplicate this a few times. So insert, we need to be able to update a row from that table. So insert into a row, update, we need to be able to delete a row. Okay, so these are the operations: insert, update, and delete. To read, we can use query, which is already created from that database class. Now we can move it from the database class to this one and simply leave the connection in there, but I think it's okay here. It's up to you. You can move this query function to the model itself if you want. It will still work exactly the same. Right, so let's see, should we do that? Maybe we should. I think it makes more sense. So let me remove this. We just leave the connector in the database here, and let's put it here. So I'm going to replace this with the query function, like so. So public function query, and we can say this connect, because once we use database, it's as good as having this function in here as well. And sometimes we just want to get one record from the query result. So instead of query, we'll just say get row, like that. You can name these functions anything you want. Okay, so just get row. The only difference with this one is that this one will return just the first result, like this. Okay, otherwise everything else remains the same. And then I want another function called first. Actually, you know what? I'm beginning to doubt this. Let me move these, actually, both of those, back to database. Sorry about that. Yeah, because database is a trait. Whatever, at least it should have a minimum of querying at multiple queries and one row, at least. So that when we use this trait in another, maybe we want the controller to have the ability to just query directly, then we can just say use database in the controller, or in any of these. We can just say use database, products, use database, and then we can run whatever is inside database directly without having to deal with a model. So that's up to you, because there will be times when you don't want to deal with a model. You can do it that way. Okay, so wait, there's get row here. Where is model? Okay, so we don't need get row anymore. So here what I want is one more function called first. Okay, so these are the functions that will be inside model. First is going to return one row, just like we did with get row here. This returns one row, but there will be a big difference, because here we put a query, but here we want to we won't be typing queries. Instead, we'll just be putting values. The queries will be auto-generated. So you'll see that. Same as insert here. We just put the values we want to insert and it will create a new record for us. We don't need to write a query itself, just like update and delete. Now, these params we'll get here we'll need an ID for the update and the delete. Actually, the delete only needs an ID. So if we give it the ID, it will know which row to delete based on the ID. Okay. Now, there may be sometimes you don't want to use the main ID. You can put another one called ID column like this. So the default value is ID. Now, if you don't want to use the ID column, if your columns is not called ID, the one that you want to use to search for which row to delete, you can put in a different one here. Same thing here, we have update, the ID we want to use, and then from there we will put in the data that we want to update, right? So the data cannot be empty. And then, just like here, we can put a different ID column if we want, like that. Okay? If we don't want to use the ID column, if we do, we just leave that be. In the insert, all we want is the data we need to insert. We don't need to know what row number it should be. That will be auto-generated. The first, actually, there's one more function missing, which is the where function. Okay, so this one we just need data. Just like this one, we just need data. So these functions are exactly the same, only that this one returns one row, while this one returns multiple. So all we need to do now is create a query here, and then use the query function to actually get a result from there, because the query function requires a query and some data. Okay, so cool. So the where clause is for getting results from a specific record. So let's imagine we want to run a query, and the query is like select from or from users where the ID is equal to ID, like that. So this is a valid query, only that ID could be a number like this one. Okay, so this is a valid query. The only thing is we want to avoid putting variables, actual variables in here, because we might do something like this and whatever is inside ID will be part of the query. But like I said, because of SQL injection, we shouldn't do this, because you could have SQL injection. Instead, we'll do something like this. And this tells PDO that this is a variable, okay? And so it means we should provide some data, actual data, later. So the way we'd run this query is by doing this and say this query, and then we put our query in there, which is this text at the top. But then we have to put an array here, because we're telling it that there is ID somewhere. We have to put an array that has ID with an actual value like 23, like that. And so when this goes to the database, it's going to run this query, this function, which gets a query and some data, and this data will be injected during the execution after the query itself has been prepared. So that's how that works. So what I want to do is that from just this array, I want to be able to create something like this. So we're just going to say query is equal to, say, select all from users. Now this table, users, is very specific. What if we want to use this model for a different table? So what we will do here is we're going to put a protected value. We'll say protected, sorry here, small letter. So protected is just like public, but it's just like private, but inheritable. So don't worry about that. You can check my OOP course to know what that does. Now what we'll do is, like I said, each table, database table, will have a separate model, and each model will have this value which tells the PHP what table the model represents. So I'm just putting a generic value here, but this will be overwritten by specific models and their actual tables. So in order to access this, we're going to do this. Let's say this table. So whatever is in here will be put there. So selector from this table, where there, instead of saying ID is equal to ID, we're going to use the data from here to do that. So what I'll do is I'll just grab the keys first from that data. Keys is equal to, there's a function called array keys, which will just grab all the keys from an array. So from this now, I can implode the keys to do this, because where this is equal to that, and then if there are several of them, we'll say and maybe date is equal to now or something, I don't know. But when we have multiple values here, if we have a single value, then we just say ID is equal to ID, and then if we have multiple, we say and, just like that. Okay, and this, that. Now we can use the where clause and put also data not, like that. Now data not is going to be the part where it says, instead of, if we have two values here, this should be translated as maybe ID is equal to this and date is equal to this, and then you need to grab what's in here and say and maybe ID is not equal to whatever is in that particular ID that's in here. So this is for negation, this is for what you are looking for, this is for what you are not looking for. Okay, so we can do the same here for there, because this is literally the same function, just that it returns one result here. Okay, so what the part we need to create is this part using just the data from there. So I will forget about this for now. I'll try and use that. So we grab these keys and implode them. So just going to say keys string is equal to, actually maybe let's do a loop instead. Should it be a loop? Yeah, I think it should be a loop. So we'll do for each keys as key. And then here I'm just going to say string or str is equal to, let's start with an empty string and then update it as we loop. So whatever the key is, we update. So here we're just going to say str is equal to the key name, and then we concatenate with some text equals that, and then the key again. So what I'm simply doing is trying to recreate this. So key, which is, let's say the key is ID, and then we put the key again here after this. So it's just like ID is equal to, like this, ID is equal to ID. So this is what I'm trying to recreate here. But then if there's more than one, there should be an and at the end. So we're just going to concatenate the and like so. Put some space like that. Okay, so that it repeats as many times as we need. And then we can also do a for each loop for the not version. So this one, keys not. So just like we've done with this, I will duplicate this and do keys not, which will use the data not. And exactly the same thing. Instead here we'll say not equal to, maybe I should leave a space there, just, yeah. And this not equal to and. And then at the end, I just want to remove the and that is at the end because I don't want it hanging like that. So I'm just going to do string is equal to trim. let's trim the string, and then we give it what we want to trim, and that's space and the ampersands, like so. So it will trim all that out. And yep, that string now, actually maybe instead of string I can just put query here. So what I'll do is I'll change string to query, even here as well, query, and then do a string is equal to, here we are concatenating, so let's put a dot and a dot there. We are saying add to, that's what the dot equals mean. Let's put query here as well. Then start the query with this part up to here where it says where. So let's put that here. So selector from the table where, that's why it's the where function. And then we add the where part here up to here. We trim that out. And then we add, what do we add here? Now here, I want to put another protected value, just so we can have pagination as well. I'll say protected limit and offset. I'll show you how to use these for pagination. So offset is 0, limit, we'll put it at 10 results for now. And so here, the query now will concatenate. After everything, we'll say limit, leave that space there, and then we'll say this limit, okay, then offset, and then we'll say this, whatever is in the offset of that, like so. Okay, and then we can run the query. But before we run the query, I just want to show you what we've done here. So I'm just going to say echo query. That way you see what's going on. All right, very cool. So let's try and use the where function. I'll go back to my home controller right here. So we have a model is equal to new model, and here I'm just going to use the where function. And if I come back, the where function, the not is supposed to be optional. So I'm just going to put an empty array so that we don't always need it. So back here, in the where clause, I want to select an item with an ID of 1. So I'm just going to supply an array with a key named ID and then put the value of the ID. This is the same as doing this, creating an array and say is equal to array like that, array ID is equal to 1, like that. And then I put the array in here, like so. Okay, so model where. Now what I want to do is just say result is equal to, yeah, let me remove this here. Then all I want to do is show the result. So just ID is equal to 1. Now let's see what this does. So if I refresh, unclosed home.php on line 10. So there's something unclosed on line 10. Open bracket. Oh, I forgot that. Sorry about that. Refresh, and there we go. So you see, this is the query we've created. Selector from users where ID is equal to. Let me leave a space here as well. So if back to model, I can redesign this by putting a space here. Yep, that's better. Okay, so ID is equal to ID, limit 10, offset 0. Very nice. Now imagine I want to use more items to determine what I want. So instead of just the ID, I want where the ID is 1, but also I want where the name is equal to that. Okay, so let's see if there's a record like that. So you see, this is the query we make. Selector from users where ID is equal to this ID and name is equal to name, limit, or offset. Okay, cool. So we're going to give that information here, but let's see if it will actually get a result. So we are using the where clause, but it's not actually running anything. So instead of echoing the query, Oh wait, let me come back here. Let's see if the not as well works as intended. So I'm just going to say, put another item here and say name is equal to John, but I don't want the name to be John. So I'll put this array as array 2 like that, and then put it here. So what that should do is create a query where it says where ID is equal to ID and name is equal to name and name is not equal to name. So this won't return any result, but you get the idea. Here we can have, instead of name, we can have name 2, or another column, maybe date, okay? And then just put the date function there, like so. Maybe just the year that we want. So let's see that query we've made, and there it is. So ID is equal to ID, name is equal to particular name we've given, and date is not equal to that date we've given. So you can make a complex query from this, not too complex, but good enough. So let's see if it will return a result here. Let's remove array 2, just use that array 1, come back here and actually delete this and try to run the query. So we'll say return, that's what we'll say, this query, then run that query, and then whatever data was given there. So we'll say data and data not. Yep. Oh, we don't actually need data not. That's, oh wait, we may need that. Yes, we, this is interesting. Because the query function in database only takes in one piece of data. So what I could do is merge these two, right? So I'll delete that. I'll just say data is equal to array merge. That's how you merge two arrays. I'll put data not there and data here. That way they're all in one value, and then put them there. Okay, because we separated them just so we can create the query and know what's what, but then the variables should be mixed together after that. All right, so let's see if this will return an actual result. And there you see the ID is equal to 1 with that name there. So let's see if I wanted to, the home controller, I wanted to get a result where the name is John, then I'll do this, and you see there it returns the result that I want. Very cool. So that's the basics of how we're going to be querying things. The only difference with the other function here is this. So this is exactly like this, the first. The only difference is that here, let me duplicate the last one. Instead of return, I'm just going to say result is equal to, and then here just say return let's see, return false, but then say if result, meaning it didn't return false, then let's just return the first result here. Okay, so with PHP, if it's only one line in the if statement, you don't need to put the curly brackets. So this is valid. So if the results are returned, it will just return the first one. If not, it will return false, which is what this will return anyway in the beginning. So there we go. So we have two functions done, the where clause, the first. Now we need a function that can insert and a function that can update. Okay, so here we just the insert data. So in the same way, we want to create an array. So let me come back here to the home page. Let's try all these functions. Here, this one, we'll try the insert function. So we'll put an array here of the name and the date, for example, because really our table only has name, age, and date. So let's put age there as well. Actually, we don't need the date because it will auto add. So let's just say 45, and we want to add a new record for Peter. Okay, like that, and then insert. There will be no results here, so no need to show any results. Model, insert. Actually, we can just leave that be. So how will the insert function work? Well, it's going to be very close to this, only that. Let's grab this keys part. We need that. So like that. And then even this query where it starts from, we need that. So let's put that here. Now an insert query is like this. It says insert into whatever the table is, this table. And then here you put two brackets, and then you say values, and then another bracket like so. Insert doesn't have double E. So this is our insert query. Here we put the names of the columns, here we put the names of the values. Now since the values and the columns are the same, since we're just putting variables here, not actual values, this will be easier to make. So here all I want to do is create something like name, comma, age, comma, date, like that, okay? And then here we'll just put full columns like this, because the values will be provided separately. So this is how the insert query should look. So I just want to create this part based on this data from the keys. So here what I'll do is I'll just use an implode. So I'll just do this and say implode. And then I will put a comma. So implode will crash an array into a string, and whatever you put here will be the separator. So like you've seen, we are separating with a comma. So just implode whatever the keys are. Okay, so I'll put that in here. Now I'll do exactly the same thing here. The only difference is that these guys should have a dot at the beginning. So that's the only, a full colon at the beginning of the text. So instead of just telling it to separate by this, it can put a full colon after the comma, like that. Though the first one will also need a full colon, so let's put a full colon there. Yeah, that's about it, really. So insert into table, blah, blah, blah. This is the query. So I want you to see the query here. Let me just echo the query before we try to actually run it. Okay, so back here, this is what we want to insert. Let's see what it has done, what query it has created. So if I refresh, this is what it has said. Insert into users, name and age, values, name and age. Very simple and straightforward. So if I added more items here, let's say for example the date, it's going to reflect that. So we'll say date, we just want the year, maybe the month and the day, like that. So let's do that. And then we're going to see name, age, date, and so on. Though the values, we can't see the values, but they're there. So I'll remove that. Let's see if we can actually add this and let it run and see if it will work. So here to make it run, we just run the query. So running the query is like this. Copy, and let's put it here. Boom. Let's return false. So this query, we're not expecting any results, so we're not putting a variable here. So query, and whatever data is supplied, we put it right there. That's a simple insert query. So let's see if we can actually insert something. So in here, these are the records. We have 2 records. Let's see if we can add a third. So I'll refresh, come back, let's check it out. And as you can see, we've added Peter 45 and it worked. So the insert query as well is working. Let's look at the update query now. Or let's do the delete first because that's easier. So we want to delete this third one with ID number 3. Okay. So this one is easier. We're just going to say delete from whatever this table is, and then you put a where clause. So this really follows the way we did the where function here. So I'm just going to copy all of this and put it right here, because actually that's so this is a delete. So we're looking for the ID. So instead of all this, we're just going to say selector from that where. Actually, I didn't need all of this. So I thought I needed it, but I do not. I actually don't need this either. Neither do I need this. Array merge. I don't need that either. I don't need to return anything either here. Okay. I don't need the keys not either. So here we'll say keys is equal to select, or not, instead of select, we'll say delete from table where we'll say, let's just say where ID is equal to, it should be like this. Okay. So it's going to be equal to ID, whatever is in there. Now, if the column, let me remove array keys here. All I need to do is just say data, and then let's use the ID column, which is ID in this case. It's going to be equal to this ID we supply, and that's all. So we put that in the data. That's what we're supplying there. So instead of where, we don't know what column name will be used, so we grab this and put it here. This is what it should look for in the array, and we named it appropriately with oh, wait a minute. The ID column, wait. Where the ID column, let's say we type where name is equal to, and then we put a name value there. So this will be name in there. So where that is equal to, okay, so which means I have to repeat this here, the column name, because that's what we are using there. Okay, so it should be like that instead. So let's test this out. Before I actually run the query, I just want to echo it out and see what's going on, and then mute this. So if I come back to my home page, instead of insert, I want to delete. Now I want to delete using ID as the column name. The ID will be, oh, actually I don't need this. What I need here is just to provide the ID name. So here I want to delete record number 3. So I just need to provide that. But if I don't want to use ID as a record number, maybe your database has user ID, in that case, you're going to do that instead. So let's see what this does before we do that. Come back here and refresh, and this is what query you get. Delete from users where ID is equal to ID. Simple and straightforward. But imagine I put user ID instead. It will read like this: delete from users where user ID is equal to user ID, with the user ID being provided as 3. So let me remove this. Let's try and see if it will actually work. Let's go to model. Let's remove that. Let's remove that. So let's see if record number 3 will be deleted, because it's right here, Peter. So if I now refresh, we should have it gone, and there it is, it's gone. So the delete function is working as intended. Let's look at the update function now. Okay. So this process takes a while, especially the model part, but once you have this, it's very powerful. because you can do things very quickly by inserting, updating without having to worry about typing queries. So I think the update function works similar to the where function here. So I'm going to copy that where function and go to the update and paste. Okay, so there's an ID here and an ID column that we may need. So this part will work the same as here. So wait, we just need an ID, right? Okay. Let me paste here. So say data and then ID. That's cool. And what else did we do? Here we'll use the same where clause. So I'll copy that. And where do I put that? I'll put it here instead of these offsets and stuff. So say where ID is equal to ID. I won't need this merge. So let's remove that guy. I won't need a return. We're just updating. So let's return false. This one will just run without anything like so. Okay. So we have our data. That's cool. We have this part. We don't need this part, I think. Or maybe we do. We'll leave it there for now. So what I want to do is look at the data that, okay, so this shouldn't be named data because I'm replacing it here. So that's not cool. So instead of data, we're going to call this one array. Oh, wait. No. I think we need to merge. This is the thing here. So data comes with its own things except for the ID. So instead what I'll do is I'll leave this actually. Whatever data comes with, I'll use the column name and set add ID there. Okay, so that's fine, I guess. So update. The query goes like update. We don't need this not. Update the table, and then we say set. Then let's say ID is what you want to edit, or name. You say name is equal to, and then a name, and then a comma, and then you can say date is equal to, and then date, etc. So this is the part we need to create in these loops here. We only need one loop. We don't have the not. So to set, and then we do that. So I'll leave it like this. So here we'll get the keys from data and put them in there. Actually, we should add this after this process because we don't want the ID to be part of this update process. So let me put this right about here, just before I send this data there. So set keys, set. So we loop and say key is equal to that, and then instead of this, we put a comma instead. So key is equal to that, comma. And so once we are done with this, we can try to delete the comma, and then where, yep, I think this works as intended. So what I'll do is I'll just echo the query and see if it's correct before we try to do anything. So here we'll say update. So I want to update where the ID is equal to 3. Actually, there's no such record. Where the ID is 2, I want to add Mary as the name. So I'll put an array here instead, and then put the values in an array. So say array name is equal to Mary. Let's change the age as well. So I'm going to duplicate. Let's update the age to 50, and let's put 50 here. So we want to update the name and the age of record number 2. So let's see what record number 2 is. It's this one, John 34. So let's see if we can change that. If I go to the home and then need to update, blah, 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 nice. So let's try and refresh. So it's complaining about an unclosed bracket on line 90 in model. So let's go to model, line 90. Okay, so there's that, which we do not need. Let's refresh. This is what we get. Update users, set name is equal to name, and age is equal to age, where ID is equal to ID. So this looks fine to me. So if that's true, then let's release it to actually run. So back here, let's refresh and let's see if John has changed to Mary and age 50. And there we go, Mary 50. So the update function as well is working. So everything is working now. We can delete, we can update without and insert without typing any query. We can grab one record. We can grab many records without typing a single query. So let's see how we can utilize this in practice. All right, so let's separate these a little bit like so. Now, in order to use this, we want to be able to, we don't want to actually have this model be used by itself like this. So we're going to change this to a trait as well. So let's change this to a trait. So I'm going to put trait here instead. Trait model, like this. All right, cool. So then we can remove this protected table users as well, because this is oddly specific. It's very specific to a specific table, but the model class or trait should be agnostic. It doesn't need to know what the table name is. So let's remove that. That's for each specific model to know. So let's leave that out. Now what we want to do is we go to models here, and let me right click and say new file. Here I'll do PHP like so, and then put a class in here. So let me save this as user. So .php. Now models should be singular, not users, but just user like that. And then now I can put a class, but you know, those are just rules. User class, they are not laws, so you can follow as you wish. And then it shouldn't extend any class. Normally, if the model was a class, we would say extends model here, like that, okay? That's what we would say. If you leave this as a class, you can do that if you want. If these traits are giving you problems, just leave it as a class. But the reason I'm doing this is because I don't want the model to be instantiable, because this would not work on its own, because this table is empty. This part, this table shouldn't be very specific here, so it's better to leave it as a trait. Hopefully that makes sense, but if it doesn't, don't worry, just follow the instructions here. Here we're just going to say use model like this. That's all. That way we import the model. So every class should use model like this. And that's it. So here all we need now is the table to tell it what table we should be looking for. So we say protected table is equal to users. This is all we need for the actual class. Another thing we may need is another protected variable, which I'll show you why this would be useful. We'll say allowed columns is equal to, and then let's do that. Okay, and then in here, this is an array, and then we can tell it what columns are allowed to be editable. So in this case, we have name, and then we can have age like this. Let me put that in here like that. So you can put all the columns in there. Now this is particularly useful if, for example, you have a form for a user where a user wants to sign up, right? Now there are a lot of inputs there. Some of them you want to save, some you don't. For example, when they tick to say, I accept the user agreement, there's no need for you to save that, that tick in the database. It's just there to tell the user that they should accept the terms once they sign up. But when you click post, the post variable will contain that tick of accept terms and conditions, right? But you don't want to save that in the database. So if you have a list of allowed columns that can be edited. It doesn't matter if you give it the whole post variable, it will eliminate those columns it doesn't need and only leave those that are required and save those. This is why this part, very, very super useful, this right here. So this is all you need for your actual model class now, like the users class. The rest of the functionality is inside model and database, which makes this one very small and lean. Then here you can add some extra functions that you want to complement the user class if you need be. So we have one model at least. So this table is what it will get when doing this, when checking for this table. That's what it will use. So here in the home page, you see, instead of instantiating model, we're just going to be using this and say user. Whenever we want to write to the users table, or write, read, edit, delete, we'll do this. We'll say user is equal to new user. Then here we say, let's just add some new data, right? This is some new data I want to insert. So here I'll use user like that. I'm not expecting any results, so that's fine. I'll just remove that and insert, and then I'll just insert the array like that. So here, as you can see, I don't have to specify which table name I'm doing. As long as I instantiate the user model, it knows that I want to insert in the users table. So let's see if this is going to actually work. So back here, if I refresh, so class user not found. Okay, so great. It can't find this user class I'm trying to instantiate. Now the user class we know is in here, in the models place. And it's named exactly as the name itself. The name of the file is the same as the name of the class, which is nice. So what we can do now is create an autoloader. So we'll go to the init right here, right at the top there. This part will check if a class is called that does not exist, then it will load it. So here we're just going to call it. The function is called SPL autoload register. So this is the function that loads whatever class you want that you can't find. So this thing takes in a function like this. Now the function will receive a class name. So here let's just see echo class name. So this function is only code, this function right here is only code if PHP tries to run a class and it can't find it, instantiate a class and can't find it, it will run this function instead and tell you what the class name is that it's trying to find. So if I refresh, you see it tells me user. So what I can do with this information is that I can just say UC first, just to make sure it's capitalized, because class names, that's how we want them to be. So I'll create a file name here and say is equal to the class name, but I want to find it first. So I'll go to the app folder and go to the models folder and concatenate this name and then say .php. So you see file name there in this folder, .php. So let's see what it will show us instead. So here's the file name we got, app models user.php. So I think we can find this. So instead of this, we just say require the file. So we require that file, and that's it. So back here, if I now refresh, you see we don't get any more errors because the file has been found and worked. Let's see if we have added a new record, and as you can see, there it is, boom, 60. Okay, which has happened within the home controller. So this is what we will do. If we want to read from the database or from, let's see here, what am I trying to do? insert. So if I want to do, let's try the other functions. Let's try the where clause. So I just want where id is equal to 2. Let me remove this. So user is equal to new user, result is equal to user, where id is equal to id. Let's see if we get some results there. There we go. So it's working just fine. Now we can use the where clause. Let's try, we can put one more function with called find all, right? Let me put it down here. Let me duplicate the where clause just to get all results. So this one, we can call it find all. You can call it anything you want. That's just me. So instead of any of this, all I need to do is run a simple query. Doesn't need any data. So say select all from this table. Actually, it's something I forgot here, the order. So we can say order. The order should be in descending order. And then we can also put order column. Order column will be ID. Okay. So this will help with this part. We can put order by this order. Oops, what have I done? So that's the order type. Let me do that. Say order type. So the way it goes is something like order by ID descending. So first of all, we use the column and then the type. So this would translate to something like order by ID descending if it's left as it is right there. So this will help. We don't need this on the first. We don't need this there. We do need it here. Yep. So the order by comes before these limits and all that. Okay, great. So this find all should return all results. If I refresh here, let's go back to our home controller. Here, instead of this, we just say find all, and we don't need to supply anything there because we're just getting all results, all the records, I mean. And there we go. So it says undefined variable query, model line 18. Where is that? Oh, it should be equal without that dot. So there we go. All right, there we go. So it returns all the results, return 10 records at a time because we have pagination activated. So we can close the model thingy there and the database as well. The home, this is what we've got. Very cool. So now if we want another model like for the products table, we just copy exactly what's here and then put class product instead of user, and then tell it what table the products are found in, and then put all the columns that should be editable in here as a list. This is all I need to do. Now the reason we need this is so we can trim when saving. So let's do that right now. Actually, we need to do that in the models. We need to do that when inserting and when updating. So before we can do any of this, we have to trim down the data that comes in to leave only the required ones. So we're just going to say if not empty, okay, this allowed columns So if that variable or that array is not empty, what we'll do now is do a for each loop of this, right? So we say, no, actually we loop through the data. That's what we do. We loop through the data and check if any of the keys from the data is not available in these allowed columns. So we'll say here, if not in array. This is how you check if something is not in an array. The needle is what we are looking for. We're looking for the current key of this data, and then the haystack is where we want to find it, which is this allowed columns. So if it's not in there, then we have to unset it and say unset data and the current key. That way we delete that item from the list of data because it's not part of the allowed column, so it shouldn't be part of the query. So here you can put and say remove unwanted data. So let's copy this. We should put this also in the insert, like so. Okay, we have to clean out the data as well. Okay, so that does it. So close model.php. Everything is cool. So what I want to do at this point is remove the products.php, delete that. I just need the 404 on the home, just like this folder here, products, delete folder. Okay, I just need the home view and the file not found. That's it. And then one model user.php, and yeah, the rest are good. So if you have any functions that you want to add to your MVC, this is where you add those functions. For example, you may need a function called escape, which is very useful. You put a string in there, and then you return an escaped version of this, which uses the function HTML special chars, and that string there. So it's just used to escape some JavaScript so that you are not hacked, because somebody can instead of putting their name in the name field, they can put some JavaScript, and then when you echo it to your page, it will run instead. So we use this HTML special chars to mute it so that it doesn't run as JavaScript. Okay, so let's see what else we can add here. So in here we put all the configuration, so we can put other definitions like define. I want app name here. This one is my website as a default value. You can also put other constants like app description, best website on the planet. Okay, so you can put constants and whatever values that you want to be used throughout the file. This is where the configuration is. You can configure things like we're in debug mode or not. For example, you can say define. Let's use debug like this, and then you can set this to true or false. So we are in debug mode, which means we are in production. So this will show errors. We can do this. Say true means show errors. False means do not show any errors. So you change this to false once it's on the live server so that it doesn't show any errors. And then to utilize this, we do this in the define and debug. So what we'll do is we'll go to the index page right here after session start. Oh, the init goes there, right? Now before this, after we include all of that, we can right here and say if debug like this, then how do we do this? If debug, we'll say ionize set. The variable name is display errors, and we are in debug mode, so this will be set to 1, and then else it will be set to 0. Alrighty then, so here, instead of putting it like this, you can make this a one-liner. It's very possible. You can do this. You just put a question mark there and then run this here, and then put a full colon. If things are not the way they should, put 0 like that. So that way it's a single line thing. Yep, and let's remove that. This is just an if statement saying if this is true, then run this. If this is false, run that. Okay, so let's see if we don't get any errors when we try this. Okay, we don't. So currently the debug mode is true. So let's try and see if we can get some errors. So here I'm just going to do this. Put a 3 there, so I know I'll get an error. Okay, so there is an error. Now let's put in our config, let's put this to false, so that we are not in debug mode anymore. And if I refresh, you see all the errors are gone. So that's one way to make sure, a simple way to just say true or false to make sure errors can show or not. All right, so everything is cool. What have I forgotten? I'm thinking I've forgotten something. Oh yeah, I've forgotten this one right there. Okay, so let's fix this. So this part here is the part that I want to send. If I go to my home controller here, these right there, these variables, I want to receive variables in here. So for example here, if I say, let me remove all of this. Let me just say show A. I want to see what's inside A right now. So if I refresh, there's nothing there, as you can see. On the home page, let me just remove, where's the home view? Let me remove this image. And of course, let me delete it from the images folder. This should be a bare framework, as simple as possible. Let's delete those guys. Let me remove that as well. Alrighty then. So if I refresh, that's all I get, home view page. I don't get any of this. But if I come back to app, actually, if you look at this, you see this home, there's /d/ some characters and then / something else here. So that's what I want to talk about. I only managed to grab the home, which tells me what the page is, but I don't know what these other params are, because those may be IDs to a specific record that I want to access. So I need access to those in the controller that I have loaded, because the first one is just for telling me which controller to load. The second one is for which method to load. Okay. Now we haven't gotten to that yet, and then the others should be put in here. So what I want to do now is get back to app, and here I will put this URL there. So copy this and put it in here. So now what this would do is, you see I have home there, which is nice, as the first item here. So if you look in the home controller, I have B and C. So if I'm going to do this, show you B, and show you C, you will see that they have shared those values equally. There's home, there's D, and there's that. But also, if I say D, actually, this is fine. So I'll leave this as it is. Let's go back to app here. I want to show what's inside URL one more time because there's a slight issue I forgot. So if we come back and refresh, this is what we have. Now look, number 3 is empty. That's because I have a slash at the end here. So to avoid that, I should trim this URL before trying to use it. So I'll do trim like that. And then inside the trim function, I can tell it what exactly to trim. So I want it to remove all the slashes that are trailing or leading. That way we have a clean plate. We can get rid of number 3. And there it is, because it doesn't have a value at the end anyway. So at least now we have these nice values here. Now what I want to use number 1. Home is already used for finding the page. I want to use 1 to find the function. So currently, the function that will always run is the index function. Now, what I want to do is show you that we can have another function here. For example, the edit function. So here, I just want us to echo that we are in the edit function. From the edit function. Okay, like that. All right. And this one will be from the index function. So let's come back here and refresh. Let's see what we have. We are in the index function right now. But if I change D to, let's say, edit, we are still in the index function. So that doesn't change. So what we need to do is tell it to use that. So here I will do exactly what I have done here. But at this point, I want to check if a method within, you see here we've instantiated the controller. Now I want to check if there's a specific method inside this controller. So luckily there's a method exists. So what is the object? The object is this one, which is the class. And then what method am I looking for? I'm looking for whatever method has been given. Actually, for now, I'm looking for item number 2 on the URL here. So now item number 2 may not always exist. So what I will do is, first of all, we have to check if it exists. So I will do this. If method exists, so I'll do that. I'll put 1 here. Now it's possible this may not exist. So let's put that, and just to say if it doesn't exist, put the next best thing. Oh, wait a minute. Actually, let's just do this. This is not going to work very well. So say if not empty. Okay, so if there's something in there, then let's check if that something is a valid method. So if method exists, that's something. Okay. So if that method really exists, then we are good to go. Then we just change the method to this one. Oops. So we say this method, this one that's at the top here, we change it from index to whatever this is because it does exist. So let's change it to that. And that's great. That's all we need to do. And then here we can use that. So great. This right here deals with the method. Select method. The other one selects a controller. Alrighty then. So let's see this now. So you see, this is the edit function now that's running because we have edit there. Now if I put something that does not exist, you see it reverts to the index function. If I go back, it goes to the edit. So now I can say product/edit, and then here I can put a 1 to tell it which record to edit. So here I'm using the edit function, homepage in the edit function with record number 1. That's what we are doing here. Now this record number 1, this home and edit, I've already used them, so I don't need them. All I want is to grab what remains, because this could be 1/something/something. I need to grab the rest of them. So what I need to do is every time I use one, I should delete the others. So here, let's say I set this controller to this, I should unset this guy. So I'll say unset that guy. Okay, because I've used it from the URL. Same thing here. If I use this, let me unset it from, oops, what have I done? Let me remove it from the URL thingy there, and then just send whatever remains in there. So let's see now if I refresh, nothing seems to have changed, but if I copy this and say show URL, you will see that only these are remaining. You see the one, this one, and that one, but home and edit are missing from here, which is nice. But if let's say edit was not found, let's say I put some text, you see that now it's added to this because it was never unset. So it's part of the variables instead of being a method. So very effective. And now let me just see which ones of these items I will receive in here. So let me duplicate this. Let's see what I receive in the A, B, and C. So A, B, and C. So from the index function, I receive that, and that, which is nice, as you can see. Now, if I take this to the edit, then I can receive some different variables. So let me put them here so that we see what we receive. So I receive everything else apart from the word edit there. So everything is working as intended. So I can use these guys as IDs and all that. So let me remove that. Let me remove this. And let me remove this. So this is all it should have. Now, if you don't like extending, you'd rather use controller to do this. You can say use controller. You can change and remove this. You can change controller into a trait as well, and it will work exactly the same. Like this, come back home, and then you just need to always remember to put use controller just at the beginning here, and then you can put all your functions down there. So in this case, exactly the same thing, no errors whatsoever. So that way you will use traits instead of extending these guys. So it's up to you which method you want to use. It really doesn't matter. Okay, so with this in mind, I think being consistent is nice so that you use one method. That's up to you. At this point, we have completed our MVC system. It works. We just need to test it and see how we can make an actual website from all of this, right? So you can go ahead and add more functionality here by putting more functions, as many functions as you need, but the rest of it is done. So let's do a simple test here and see what we can come up with to try and create a simple website. All right, so let me explain one more thing. The use that you see, sometimes you're going to see this use being put here, like so. right? This will work just fine as well. The use statement, non-compound name controller has no effect. Yeah, I know it has no effect. Okay, so this is for namespaces. This is for traits. So it may look similar sometimes, but they're very different. If you put the use here, you're telling PHP that it should grab all classes that are in the controller namespace and load them into the current namespace here. So that's a topic for namespaces when it's up here. But when the use is down here, then it's a trait, like a class that you are importing in here. So that's the difference there. Let me try and clean this up a little bit. I want to copy this. Go to home controller and let me just type home class like that. Okay, so now let me close all files. We have a complete MVC system here that's working, so I'll close all that. Very nice. So if I now open the containing folder, so what you need to do as a programmer is to keep this folder safe. So every time you want to run a new project, just copy this folder and rename it, and then you can start your new project. That way you don't start your project from scratch. So let's see an example of a simple project where we insert some new users and maybe a sign up and login. Let's see how that can work out. So to begin with, let's copy, like I have said, this folder. I'm going to just copy the folder and paste it right here. So there's MVC copy. Let me rename it to test MVC. That's all I'm doing here, rename it. So now we have a different project. So I'm just going to remove folder from project and then grab the next best thing. So test MVC, I'll grab that and bring it in here. So all I've done is made a copy of it so that whatever I add now does not affect the original. So I just want to see how quickly I can create pages from this. So now if I go, this is inside testmv. Let's go to our browser here and then change from localhost to testmvc/public. Okay, so this is what you get. Now you can design a nice home page for yourself because a home page is required, always there. So you can design something nice to land on. Now, I can then go to, what's this? Let me make sure that if I go to controllers, the home controller doesn't have anything wonky. Okay, that's fine. So what I want now is to create some kind of a home page, right? So to create a home page, we can grab any template or anything like that. But let's try. We have Bootstrap. If you go to the Bootstrap website, which is getbootstrap.com, you can go to examples here, and then you can download examples. Now the examples are these pages here created with Bootstrap. Now I'm just using this because I want us all to be on the same page, because you can easily get these. But you can use any template. So there's a sign in page here, and maybe what else can we use? I want something that looks like a home page. There's a heroes here, or headers, etc., etc., or maybe cover like this one right here. So cover page. So I already did my own download here of this Bootstrap example. So I'm just going to grab Bootstrap examples here, copy it to my folder and paste it here. Okay, so there it is. Now if I extract, so I don't need this zip folder anymore. So there it is. Bootstrap examples, there it is. So what I want is to grab this cover page, right? So this one should be in the cover folder. Where is that? Right there. So there's just cover CSS and there's HTML. So what I'll do is I'll grab these guys, these two, copy, okay? Then come back to test MVC. I'll go to, this is for the home page. So the home controller already exists. So we'll use that. And the home page view already exists. So we'll use that. But what doesn't exist is the CSS. So that has to be in the public folder. So I'll go in Assets and CSS and paste it there. Then I will grab the index.html page, come back to App, Views, and paste it there. Okay, so with that, we are here. So if I go to Public, Assets, CSS, you see there is the cover CSS. If I go to Views, Index, this is the index page. So I can copy everything from here, go to my home page, select everything and paste and save. So if I come back now to my actual page, which is this one, if I refresh it, this is what I get. But it doesn't really look like what it should because some stuff are missing. If I view the page source, you'll see that there are stuff that is missing, like the CSS file. If I click on this, file not found, you see that? It gives you the 404 file not found. So let's go in through this here and see what files should be there that are not. So like this one right here, there should be a bootstrap.min.css file. It should be inside assets, dist, but this is different. We will put it inside assets, but inside CSS and then bootstrap. But then here, like I said, we must add the root, like so. Okay, so once we do that, that should be good. Everything now must be, we don't need this generator. You can edit whatever you want here, change everything. I'm just concerned with the CSS. There's also this cover.css, which we have already put inside assets/css/cover CSS. So if I refresh, I don't see a difference. That's because the original Bootstrap file isn't there. So what I want to do is go back to the Bootstrap folder, because this should contain Bootstrap in this assets folder. So here there's inside distribution, there's CSS, and then there's the JS. So I can copy these guys from here. So I'll just grab, actually I can just grab the whole folders here and go to test MVC, assets, and just replace, because it won't delete the files already existing. So you see cover CSS is in there, and we have JavaScript files now. So if I now refresh, it should work out, but it doesn't seem to. So let's look at the source and see what's wrong with the URL. So there's HTTP localhost MVC. Okay, so it's in the wrong, that's another thing you have to keep in mind. You have to go to the config and then put the correct path here. Okay, so instead of MVC public, this one is a new folder is test MVC public. Okay, that's our new folder. So if I now refresh, this is what you see. So everything seems to be working just fine. You have these pages, home, looks nice, and it's working as intended. So this is how quick you can get set up and begin doing things. So let's try and put a login page, because the examples also have a sign in page. So Let's come back to test MVC. Inside the Bootstrap, let's look for sign in. So this is the sign in page. It has this and that. So let's grab those two babies. Back to our test MVC. I'm going to public assets. In the CSS, I want to paste the signin.css. Then cut this guy. Let's go back to app, views. There's another index here we copied from, but let's replace it since we don't really need that file just there for us to copy from. So I'll copy everything from here. Now, here I want to create a login view. So I'll paste here, save this as login.view.php. Okay, then we can remove the HTML file. We don't need it. Everything has been copied over. And then right here, we need to put, we need to put our root like that. Make sure it's the correct path. Assets, there's no dist, there's just CSS, and then bootstrap.min. That's fine. Let's remove that guy. We don't need him. We don't need these names of the authors. Then there's signin.css. So similar to this, it's in the same CSS folder. So we just put that over here. Cool. So now if I go to my home view page, there's that part where there are links. There's home, but this one, let's put login, and what can we do? Yeah, login page there. And then all links, even the home page here, should have root like that. So root is home. And then here we have root/login. So if I go back now, let's refresh. There's login there. If I click on it, cannot extend a trait. Oh, sorry about that. You know, this is one thing I forgot. Because we said extend controller, we changed this to something else. So I forgot to change this too. This has to say use controller like that because we changed it to a trait. Sorry about that, forgot. So you must change that in the original folder as well. So this is what we get, page not found. So you can design your page not found as well to be nicer than this. Find a nice page not found and put it there as well. But if I go back, that's there. So the reason the login page isn't found is because we don't have a login controller, even though we have a login view. So all you have to do is copy the home controller, create a new file, paste, and then change your references to home to login like that. And then save it as capital L login.php. Okay, good. So now that we have a login controller, we can click on login and it will take us to this particular page. Okay, it's just that the logo is missing because we don't have bootstrap icons. This is a bootstrap icon, but you can put your own image there and it will work. Just remember to put root inside the path, but otherwise this is cool, right? So we can have login and sign up, and then on our home page, let me come back to the login view, and right here I want, after it says sign in, I want to be able to go to the home page. So I'll put an A tag and just say root as the path like that. Okay, and then put home there. That's all. That way it's easy to go back home and go back to the login page. We can also put a sign up page here. So let me just copy everything from the login view, copy, new, paste, save. Inside views, make sure you're saving as a PHP file or all files. Let's say signup.view.php, and same thing with the login. Copy everything, paste, change your references from login to signup. And same thing here, sign up, and save that as signup.php with a capital. So this is all you do. When you want to create a new page, just put a controller and make sure you put a view that you are referencing here in the controller. It's that simple. That's how you make new pages. So if I go to the login page, I can also put a link to the sign up page. I can say sign up, and then here all I need to do is /sign up, like that. And then copy this, go to the sign up page and put a reference to the login page as well, and change this to login and put that to login. Okay, so what I'm doing now is if I refresh, you see there's home, there's sign up. This is the sign up page. Now it leads to the login. So let me click on sign up. So let's quickly add a sign up situation here. So please sign up. You can remove the logo. So there's email, address, and password. So I just want a simple thing. And then remember me here. I'll name this one remember. No, actually, I'll name this one terms or accept the terms. Value can just be 1, doesn't matter. Accept terms and sign in. What else? Let's come back, refresh. Oh, what have I done? Let me just say create account like this. Okay. Create. All right, that's much better. So there's email address and password. So I can create an account and accept terms here like that. Okay. So now let's see how we can use this to our advantage. And let me go back to our login page. Please sign in, email, password. Okay, cool. Then let me add names here as well. So the input here and there should have names. This one is email, the other one is password. Now I have other tutorials that are in depth on this. This is just to show you how an MVC system can help you create something very quickly. So with this here, if I now do some creating, once I click, make sure here the method is post. Same thing on the login here, otherwise it won't work. So we put a post method there. Once I send this data, it will go to the sign up controller. So right here on the sign up controller, I can simply do show post like that, just so I can see what's inside the post. If I refresh, you see it's right there. But let's try email at email.com and password to create an account. So I'll say create, and you'll see the information there, right? So now all we need to do right here is just create a new user. User is equal to new user class. Okay, it will try and find it from the models section. And then from there, we just say user insert. And then we insert everything in the post variable like that. Now, if you want to be able to validate, you can use this user thing as well. You just say if user, and then you say validate, and then you put this post information right there to validate the information before you save it. So if this returns true, then you insert. And then after you insert, you can redirect the user. So we can create a function which is also useful, redirect, and then let's redirect to the home page like so. Now this is not a valid function, so we're going to have to create it here. Now every function you add here, go and add it to your original MVC to make it grow bigger over time. So function redirect, Whatever functions, new functions you think you would always need, just put them in here and put them in the original as well. So let's see, path. This one will redirect to the root slash. We put a slash because root doesn't have a slash, and then we put the path like this. So to redirect, we use the header like that, and then say location, full colon, and then do that, concatenate the path like so. And then make sure you put die so that the script does not continue after the redirect. So copy this function to the original MVC as well, put it there after you are done with this, because this will tell you what new things you need. So once we insert, we do that. Now the user thing doesn't have a validate function. So like I said, you can go in here and actually add some stuff. So usually the functions you need to add here are all public because they'll be used outside. It depends. So we're adding a function validate here, which will bring in some post data. Now I don't want to use post like this. I'll just rename it to data so it doesn't get from the post variable directly. And then all you can do here is this. You can go to the original model and give one more of these items called errors. This should be equal to an empty array like that, so that it always exists. So let me do that just to be neat. Okay, so we have errors, which is empty. Nice. So once you instantiate here, always set this errors to an empty array, just to make sure, just in case last time it wasn't, you make it an empty array. And then at the end, you just check if empty this errors. If there's nothing in that error array, let's return true. Otherwise, we return false. So we return false to say validation failed. This one means validation is true because we didn't get any errors. And then in here, so if you want, you can keep this function in the original MVC as well, because I'm sure you will always need to validate information. Then all you have to do here is check whatever data you want. For example, if you say if empty data email. So if the email wasn't sent, you just say this errors, and then you give it a key. And there you say this errors email with the same, and then you put your error message, email is required. Oh. Then you can put an else statement if you want. Put another if data email. There's a way to validate emails using PHP. You can say filter var. You put the variable there. You tell it how you're filtering it. You say filter validate. You can check this on php.net to see how this works. But this is how you validate an email. So we'll put an exclamation mark to negate that, so that if it doesn't qualify, then you say email is not valid. Okay, and then you can do the same for a password. Password is required. Just go down and add some more and say change this to password. Password is required. Just like that. And then the errors are saved in there. Now, since the errors are saved in a variable in the users class, it means if I go to my sign up, let me close all this, right here, user validate. If things do not work out, then what I can do is I can say errors is equal to user errors, like that. So whether there are errors or not, user errors will always exist because it's part of this class, and then you can send it to this. So this will either contain the errors that were encountered here, or it will be empty if there were no errors. But in that case, it won't matter because we'll be redirected anyway. So if we are not redirected, it means this didn't work out. So we will have errors down here. So all you need to do now is send your data here. And that's one thing I actually forgot. Sorry about that. We need to have a space here to actually send data to the view, because actually right now the view cannot receive data from the controller, which is a tragedy. So what I need to accept that is to go to the controller part. So here there is view, the name of the view, but we can put an extra thing here for data and set it to an empty array just in case it doesn't exist. So we'll say if not empty data. If there is some data, what we'll do is we'll extract that data like so. That's all we need to do in order to make sure that this data is sent down here, because this is included from here. So anything we extract here will be available to the file down there. So that's another thing to keep in mind. So once we insert, now if we do have errors, I can go to my sign up view, and right here we can do a check to see if the variable errors exist. Now, in order for us to be able to send it in the first place, this variable like this will not be available here because we are only sending this one. So what I'll do is I'll say data like this, data errors, so that once we send data, it will contain an item called errors in there, like so. Okay, cool. Now in the view of the sign up, we can check if errors is not empty and echo out the errors. So here I can put a div. Now since we're using Bootstrap, we can put some Bootstrap classes like alert, alert danger, like that. Okay. And then we can put some PHP tags where we loop through. So since it's MVC, always be mindful. Whatever logic you want to do should be done in the controller. In the view, you should only do loops and echo. Loops, echo, that's it. Anything other than that should be done in the controller. That way you limit how much PHP code is in the view. Okay, so loops, only loops and echo. So in here, since we are putting a loop, this is fine. So say errors as error. Let's remove all of that. So each error, we're just going to echo it out. And in fact, there's no need to even do this. I can just implode this. So let me grab this right there and just say implode. The glue will be a break tag. That's all. And then the pieces, errors, like that. So I'm just going to echo this. This is simple. Now instead of doing all this echo, I just do that and that. Keeps it very nice and neat. And then here I can say PHP and say if not empty errors. Put a full colon, close that, and then put an end if right there, like so. And let's do that. Very nice. So that only when it's not empty do we get this alert. So let's see that. So if I click create, cannot access property errors because it is protected. Sorry about that. So if we go to model here, this should not be protected. It should be public. Okay, that's it. So refresh, resend, email is required, password is required. Okay, so if I click, password is required, but this one is gone. So you can put functions in there to give you the old value so you don't have to retype it again. But for now, this is all we need. So we just want email and password in our thing. And also keep in mind that the config, you should put your database file and all the database information to make sure you're accessing the right database. But here, I want to empty my table. So I'll go to operations and say truncate. This is the users table in my DB. If I go to browse, this is what I see. And this doesn't qualify with what I want. So I'm just going to go to the structure and change it. Name, I will change this one to email because that's what I have. So save that. Age, I'll change that to password. So change that to password. And password variable character, let's put 255. Let me save. And then the date, we'll leave it as it is. So that's up to us. So now also remember that once you change the columns in there, they should reflect the same thing here in your model. So email and then password. Those are the editable ones. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to save anything. All right, so there we go. So with that in mind, if I come back, if I click browse, it's empty, right? Then if I put email and put password there, maybe we should accept the terms. So here, I'm just going to go to this part as well, duplicate, and put terms here. So we'll say, please accept the terms and conditions. Yep, if that's empty, then we don't go. So please accept the terms and conditions. So accept, email, password, and then let's create. And as you can see now, things have worked out. If I go to browse, you see that we have a new record there. Very, very nice. So now if I go to my login page, I should be able to log in. Now, how do I know I'm not logged in? Here, actually, once we sign up, we should be redirected to the login page, I guess. And then if I copy all of this for my sign up page, for my login page, I can paste that in here. Now, I don't need to validate this. I just need to read from the database, right? And I don't need to insert. So I need a where clause. I just need the first, that's the function we created. So this redirects to the home page. It should, well, if things work out. Also, we need only do this when something was, and that's what I forgot here. This is crazy. I should put a if server request method if server request method is equal to post, then something was posted. This is the only time we need this code to run, like so, when something is posted. So I'll copy this back to the login controller as well. Okay, cool. So when something was posted, we try to find a row, right? And then redirect to home if everything goes well. But once we read from there, what I want to use here is not just the post, but I want to read the email from there, right? Let's apply, actually, this is not what I need. I need to put an array here. So let me just do this. We'll say array email is equal to. So we're just looking for a record with whatever email is supplied. If we find the record, then we check the password. So we say if row, and then check to see if the password in the row is equal to the password in the post. Then we can authenticate and redirect. So authentication is up to you. In my case, we can just use the session variable like this and say session user is equal to row. So whatever row we got from here, let's save it in the users in the session, because the session variable is always active as long as the session is active. So we can just save that entire row in there if you want and redirect to the home page. As simple as that. Otherwise, let's do the error thingy. So I'm just going to copy what I put here, the error message, to the login page as well. Where did I put this? Right after the form, like that. Okay. Cool. So if we have errors, they're gonna show up there. And back again to the login page, I need to make sure these guys have names. So name, email, this one should be named password. Remember me could be another issue, which we can't do here now. Cool. So if I go to the login, let me try and log in, and okay, so I'm not getting anything there. No errors. That's because I didn't set it up that way. So here, if the file is not found, if we are posted and we do get to this point, then we will have some error problems. So what I can do is add an error to this errors thing. Users errors email is equal to wrong email or password. So we're simply adding an error to the user errors part and then setting it to here so that we can send it there. So data is required. So wrong email or password added there. That's good. Let's see if that will work. So it says wrong email or password. Let's try and add the real thing and then put password there. Let's see if that will work. And it worked. Now, how do we know it worked? We should add somewhere where it says hi and show you who you are. So if we go to the home view here, we can echo out something that exists. So I can go to the home part here, and right here I can say something like username is equal to, and then say empty session user. Now, instead of me having to check if the session user is active, because I may want to change which of these I store the data in. So you can create a function that just reads from this session variable called user, right? And then run that function instead of having to read directly there. But this is fine too. So if this is empty, we're going to set this username to simply user. And then if it's not, we will set it to user email, whatever the email is of that current user. And then since we want to send it here, we want to use a variable called data. And so we will do data here, username, like that, so that it's sent to the view side as username. Okay, so what this enables us to do is to avoid checking, putting an if statement to check, because username will always be set, either to be set to the word user or the email, okay, or you can set it to unknown. So now if I go to my home view page, I can simply come to, where does it say your cover page? Cover your page, right there. So right before this one, I can just put maybe h4 tag here and just echo out username. All right, like that. So if I now do this, there you go. That's my email. So I can just say hi, like that. Hi. Hi. So let's put a logout page as well so we can see that we are able to log out. So log out. Just like this is, we'll copy that, put it here, and put logout like so. Let's refresh. All right, so we should have a logout page, easy peasy. Now the logout page doesn't have a view, so all we need is to copy maybe from the home controller and right click, new file, paste, change that to logout and logout here as well. Let's remove this view because we don't need a view at all. This is logout.php. Let's redirect to the home page. Now, all I need to do is check if this session is saved. So say if not empty, then unset it. Simple as that, and then redirect. That's all. So log out, and now you can see I've logged out. I'm just a user now. If I log in, oh, undefined variable data on line 33. Let's check that out. Yeah, that's one thing I forgot. The login. There's data here that we are only creating here. We don't have any other value that. So I think it would be better to just leave this so that at least we have something that this is not undefined, right? But the problem is user is being created here as well. So maybe what you could do, let me undo this. Maybe you can just create an empty version of it. Say data is equal to empty array. That way it's always there, regardless what happens later. So same thing here, we will need to put it there like so. Okay, so refresh login page. Let's try and log in. Email, password, sign in. Now I'm signed in. Look at that. If I go and log out, try to log in, maybe let's try to sign up. So let me try mary@email.com, password. I need to accept the terms, create. Now I can log in as Mary and password and log in. Now you see Mary. Very nice. If I try to log in as somebody that doesn't exist, it doesn't work. Yeah, so back to the home page. I'm still logged in as Mary. So this is how a MVC system can help you out to create a website, can speed things up. So I'm going to be using this MVC system in a lot of my projects because it's easy to get up and running when we already have an MVC system. So one thing to note is that we edited our, so let me grab we edited some things. So let's update our MVC, our original MVC. So I'm going to grab the folder, bring it in here as well. That way we can compare and contrast. So for example, the 404, I changed it to have that. So let me copy that. Go to MVC app controller 404, paste. Okay. Let me close all files just to avoid confusion. And what else did I change? I changed, let's look at the functions. There's a redirect function now, so copy that. Let me go to the original MVC functions. Let's add a redirect function there. Cool. What else did I miss? In the model, I added errors now. So let me copy everything from the models thingy. into the models for the main model here, select all, paste, save. In the user model as well here, I added, this is a much better one because it has validation as well. So let me copy this user model into the other one and paste. Very nice. I think that's all we really changed that needs changing. The rest we don't, because we don't need more pages in here or more views or anything like that. So with all this to conclude, if you want your MVC to have a basic homepage like this one and not just to see, because if I go back to just MVC here, this is the homepage we have for our original MVC. If you want, you can use Bootstrap and use this as the basic landing page or the homepage so that you don't start from scratch. But that's up to you if this is useful to you or not, or you can just leave it as this one. So it's all a matter of knowing what you always repeatedly use and then put that in advance in your MVC system. So at this point, our MVC is done and it works as intended. So we can close it. You can even zip it as a zip file if you want, the zip folder, so that you extract it whenever you want to create a new website. Now I'm going to be using this same MVC for most of my projects from now on, so that we don't always have to start from scratch, because a large part of my tutorials are wasting time on creating an MVC system. So I will be referencing this video instead. All right, so hopefully you have learned something new, and I will see you in another tutorial.